My parents told me not to come home for Thanksgiving because my sister did not want drama. So I went to a high-end restaurant alone. The family at the next table invited me to join them. 8 years later, they are now my legal family, and my parents found out at my wedding. It was the ultimate betrayal, but it set me free. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who underestimated your worth. 8 years ago, on Thanksgiving morning, the crisp autumn air in Atlanta felt unusually heavy. I was standing in my small, cramped apartment kitchen covered in flour preparing my famous sweet potato pie. I had spent 3 days perfecting the recipe just for them. My phone rang loudly. It was my mother, Cynthia. She did not ask how my morning was going. She did not ask if I needed help bringing the food over to the house. Instead, her voice came through the speaker sharp and cold. "Do not come home for Thanksgiving, Naya. Jasmine has her new fiancé Spencer coming down from Charleston. His family is traditional old money. Your loud attitude and your thrift store aesthetic are just going to cause drama, and your sister does not want you there." I stood completely frozen. The pain in my chest was sharp and completely suffocating. The flour on my hands felt like dry dust. My own mother was evicting me from our family holiday because my white trust fund brother-in-law-to-be might be uncomfortable with the dark-skinned, struggling college graduate of the family. Jasmine was always the golden child. She got the designer clothes, the private tutors, and the endless praise. I got the hand-me-downs and the constant reminders that I needed to tone myself down to fit in. I did not yell. I did not argue. I simply said, "Okay, Mom," and ended the call. Ended. I washed my hands, watching the water swirl down the drain, taking my last shred of familial loyalty with it. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the only tailored suit I owned. I bought it with my first paycheck from my entry-level financial job. I put it on, adjusted my collar, and walked out the door. I drove straight to Pop's Bones and Steaks in Buckhead. It was the hardest dining reservation to get in Atlanta, especially on a major holiday, but I walked in with my head held high. I asked for a table for one. The hostess looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, but seated me at a small table near the back corner. I ordered the most expensive dry-aged steak on the menu and a glass of vintage red wine. I took out my tablet and opened the financial modeling drafts I had been working on for weeks. If my biological family did not want me, I was going to focus on the one thing that would never abandon me: my ambition. I sat there reviewing complex spreadsheets, calculating market projections, and blocking out the loud, joyful holiday chatter all around me. About an hour into my meal, the general manager approached my table. He wore a tight, forced smile that I recognized instantly. It was the smile people give when they are about to treat you like a second-class citizen. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "We have a highly important VIP party arriving shortly, and we need to clear this section immediately. I am going to have to ask you to pack up your things and vacate the table." I looked up from my glowing screen. I had not even received my steak yet. I politely informed him that I was a paying customer and I was waiting for my hot food. He shook his head, crossing his arms over his chest. "I understand, but this is a private event for some of our most exclusive members. I can box your meal to go, but you cannot stay here anymore." My heart hammered against my ribs. First my mother, and now this restaurant manager. Everyone was trying to push me out of the room. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to refuse to be moved again. But before I could speak, a commanding, authoritative voice cut through the thick tension. "The young lady is with us." I turned to see a breathtakingly elegant African-American woman sitting at the large VIP table adjacent to mine. She wore a flawless silk blazer and carried an aura of absolute, undeniable power. Beside her sat a handsome man about my age, who I would later learn was her son Julian. The manager immediately paled. He practically bowed to her. "Ms. Victoria, I am so sorry, I did not realize she was part of your party today." Victoria Sterling, a legendary private equity mogul in the South, dismissed him with a single wave of her hand. She gestured for me to bring my plate and join them. I moved to their table, still in complete shock. Victoria introduced herself and Julian. She poured me a glass of her own private reserve wine. She did not ask why I was alone on Thanksgiving. Instead, she pointed to my tablet. She had been watching me work from a distance. She asked me about the financial models I was building. I explained my theories on undervalued commercial real estate acquisitions. Victoria listened intently. She asked sharp, piercing questions that I answered with absolute confidence. We talked for hours about life and corporate strategies. As the dinner finally came to a close, Victoria looked at my screen, then looked me dead in the eye. Your parents threw away a diamond to polish a rock, Nia. How would you like to legally become my daughter? The rehearsal dinner at the exclusive Piedmont Driving Club was supposed to be an intimate gathering of our closest friends and colleagues. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden light over tables draped in heavy silk. A string quartet played softly in the corner, setting a tone of quiet elegance. I was seated near the center of the room, nursing a glass of sparkling water, when the heavy oak doors swung open. My biological family marched in, as if they held the deed to the building. They were completely uninvited, but they carried themselves with the loud, desperate entitlement of people constantly trying to prove they belonged among the elite. My mother, Cynthia, immediately began criticizing the floral arrangements to a passing waiter, waving her hands as if her opinion mattered. My father, Richard, headed straight for the premium scotch at the bar, pushing past a local judge to get his drink. Then there was Spencer. He was sweating profusely through a wrinkled seersucker suit that looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of a damp laundry basket. He was desperately trying to project an image of Southern old money, but among actual generational wealth and self-made titans of industry, he stuck out terribly. He looked frantic and out of his depth, and I watched from my seat as Spencer navigated toward the mahogany bar. Julian was standing there taking a quiet moment away from the crowd. He was wearing a custom-tailored midnight blue suit, looking effortlessly powerful and completely at ease. Spencer, completely blind to social cues and dripping with unconscious bias, cornered him. Spencer pulled a cheap, flimsy business card from his pocket and shoved it forcefully into Julian's hand. "You must be the diversity hire event planner," Spencer said loudly, his voice cutting through the soft jazz. "Listen, my wife's sister is marrying some guy today. She used to wear Jasmine's hand-me-downs. Tell the staff to keep the cheap champagne flowing for her side of the family, all right? I am expecting a very important phone call from Sterling Capital tonight to fund my tech startup, so I need absolute quiet in this room." Julian did not blink. He looked down at the business card resting in his palm. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his bourbon. His face remained perfectly calm, but knowing him as well as I do, I could see the dangerous glint of amusement in his eyes. He was dealing with a man who was actively trying to leverage a house he did not own to secure a loan from the very firm Julian ran. Julian smiled a sharp predator's smile. "I will make sure the CEO of Sterling Capital hears all about your pedigree, Spencer," Julian replied smoothly. Spencer puffed out his chest, completely missing the quiet threat in Julian's voice. He actually patted Julian on the shoulder and walked away looking incredibly pleased with himself. He truly believed he had just asserted dominance over the staff. He had absolutely no idea he had just insulted the billionaire groom who held his entire financial future in the palm of his hand. My attention was pulled away from the bar by the sharp clicking of heels against the hardwood floor. Jasmine was striding across the dining room. Her eyes were darting around, taking in the sheer luxury of the event. She saw the state senators, the corporate executives, the elite society members mingling in my honor. Her face twisted with pure, unfiltered jealousy. She could not stand that the sister she had always viewed as beneath her, the sister she was supposed to outshine, was hosting an event she could only dream of affording. Her own wedding had been a hastily thrown-together affair because of Spencer's sudden liquidity issues, and standing in this gorgeous glass house was clearly pushing her over the edge. Jasmine locked eyes with me from across the room. Her gaze dropped to the back of my chair where a pristine white garment bag was hanging securely. Inside that bag was a piece of custom couture. A waiter was passing by at that exact moment, carrying a large silver tray loaded with full glasses of deep dark red Cabernet. I watched her calculate the distance and the timing. She adjusted her path, picking up her pace. She stalked forward and intentionally slammed her shoulder hard into the waiter. The waiter stumbled backward, trying desperately to balance the heavy load. The tray tipped. A tidal wave of dark red wine cascaded down directly onto the white garment bag, soaking the fabric instantly. The dark liquid pooled on the floor, spreading like a massive bruise. The room went dead silent. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Everyone turned to look at the ruined bag and the shattered glass on the floor. Jasmine did not apologize. She did not even look at the terrified waiter who was frantically trying to clean up the mess. She simply turned to me, looking at the wine dripping from the garment bag, and smirked. "Oops. Guess you will have to get married in rags again." My father stares at the pen in my outstretched hand. The redness in his face deepens, shifting from the hot flush of self-righteous anger to the cold, pale realization of a man who has just stepped onto a hidden landmine. He lowers his voice, glancing nervously around the elegant dining room to ensure none of Spencer's supposed high society friends are listening. He demands to know what I am talking about, his tone a mixture of forced authority and rising panic. I keep my expression completely neutral. I tell him that I audit the high-risk loan applications at Sterling Capital. I saw the file Spencer submitted yesterday. I saw the collateral listed on page 4. It was the 4-bedroom colonial house in Buckhead. The exact house my parents spent 30 years paying off. The sweat breaks out on my father's upper lip, glistening in the light of the crystal chandeliers. He tries to recover his bluster, puffing out his chest and stepping closer to me in an attempt at physical intimidation. He defends Spencer with the desperate, blind loyalty of a fool. He tells me that Spencer is a brilliant visionary and that his tech startup just needs a temporary bridge loan to get through a minor rough patch. He says they are a family, and families invest in each other no matter what. He points a shaking finger at me and demands that since I work at Sterling Capital, I need to use whatever low-level connections I have to push the approval through the financial committee. He actually has the nerve to remind me of everything they gave me growing up. The food on my plate, the roof over my head, the very name I carry. I do not flinch. I remind him that they threw me out on Thanksgiving 8 years ago because my presence was a social liability to their precious son-in-law. I look at him with pure, unadulterated indifference. I tell him the loan is already flagged for fraud because the CO signer signature does not match Cynthia's official bank records. Richard forged his own wife's signature to hand their entire retirement safety net over to a man who openly disrespects them. My father opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. He is completely trapped, and he knows it. Our quiet confrontation is interrupted by Jasmine. She is still sobbing loudly over her ruined silk gown, causing a massive scene in the middle of the country club. She points at me, screaming that I planned this, that I am just a bitter, jealous spinster trying to ruin her spectacular vow renewal. She demands the money for the dress right now. I do not argue. I calmly uncap my gold fountain pen. I rest my checkbook on the pristine white tablecloth and write a check for exactly $10,000. I tear it out and hold it between my fingers. Jasmine snatches it from my hand with a triumphant sneer, thinking she has just won a massive victory. I do not bother to tell her that Spencer's accounts are heavily leveraged, and the moment she tries to deposit that check, the bank will seize it for his outstanding debts. I let her have her fleeting moment of joy. Spencer finally wanders over, wiping sweat from his brow with a cocktail napkin. He looks at me with utter disdain, telling Richard not to waste time talking to the venue staff. He still truly believes I am the event planner hired to fetch their drinks. Richard looks absolutely terrified, trying to shush his golden son-in-law, because Richard now knows I work at the very firm Spencer is begging for money. Spencer, completely oblivious to the panic radiating from my father, tells Jasmine to dry her tears, because by tomorrow morning, they will be swimming in venture capital cash and can buy 10 new dresses. I pick up my designer evening bag and smooth the front of my dress. Julian appears seamlessly at my side, his hand resting gently and protectively on my lower back. I look at my biological family standing there in their wrinkled suits and wine-soaked dresses. I tell my parents I will see them tomorrow at the ceremony. I tell them to get some rest because tomorrow is going to be a very long and revealing day. Julian escorts me out of the country club, leaving them to stew in their own toxic panic. The drive home in this back of our town car is peaceful. Julian holds my hand and we watch the city lights of Atlanta blur past the tinted windows. We do not need to discuss the trap that has been set. The snare is already pulled tight, and all we have to do now is wait for them to struggle. The morning of the wedding arrives with brilliant sunshine pouring over the botanical garden glasshouse. I am sitting in the luxurious bridal suite surrounded by elite makeup artists and the soft, soothing hum of classical music. The serenity of the morning is violently broken when the heavy wooden doors fly open. Cynthia storms past the private security guard, completely ignoring my custom couture wedding gown hanging in the corner of the room. Her face is twisted in a mask of pure panic and entitlement. Spencer's investors backed out. She breathes heavily, her voice shrill and demanding. He needs a family bridge loan to keep his company afloat. Sign this as the guarantor, Nia. You owe us for raising you. If you don't sign this, we won't walk you down the aisle. I look calmly at the paper crumpled in her shaking hand. It is a fraudulent guarantor form, hastily printed and completely legally binding if signed. You want me to co-sign a loan for a white man who told me I was socially unfit to sit at his Thanksgiving table? I ask, letting the makeup artist continue applying my lipstick without missing a beat. I reach out and take the document, flipping the paper over and setting it face down on my vanity. But Mom, why do you need me to sign? According to this background check, Spencer already opened 3 credit cards using my old social security number from when I lived at home, didn't he? Cynthia's face loses all its color. Her jaw drops open and she stares at me as if I have just slapped her. For a fraction of a second, I see genuine terror in her eyes, but it is immediately replaced by that familiar toxic defensiveness she has weaponized my entire life. She does not apologize. She does not express a single ounce of shame for aiding her golden son-in-law in committing federal identity theft against her own daughter. Instead, she straightens her posture and glares at me through the vanity mirror. She tells me to lower my voice as if the elite makeup artists in the room are the ones committing the crime. She claims that Spencer just had a temporary cash flow problem and that because I lived under her roof for 18 years, my pristine credit score was technically a family asset. She actually has the nerve to say that Jasmine needed a lavish lifestyle to feel secure in her relationship, and it was my duty as a sister to provide a financial cushion. I do not raise my voice. I do not let her see even a flicker of anger. I calmly instruct the makeup artist to apply my setting spray. I look at my mother and explain the reality of her situation. I tell her that I froze my credit the exact morning they threw me out on Thanksgiving 8 years ago. I tell her that I placed advanced fraud alerts on my social security number. Spencer did not get away with anything. The moment he tried to open those accounts, the banks flagged his IP address and routed the fraudulent applications directly to a federal fraud database. Cynthia takes a step back, her hands trembling as the gravity of the situation finally begins to penetrate her thick shell of denial. She tries to pivot immediately, shifting from aggressive demands to desperate manipulation. She starts crying, producing those fake, fragile tears she always uses to get her way. She begs me not to report Spencer. She says Jasmine is depending on this wedding to establish her place in Charleston high society. She tells me that if Spencer goes down, he will take their house with him because Richard blindly signed over the deed as collateral. Right on cue, the heavy doors to the bridal suite burst open again. Richard marches in, his face red and sweating profusely. He does not compliment my dress. He does not tell me I look beautiful on my wedding day. He marches straight up to my chair and points a shaking finger at me. He tells Cynthia that the loan officer from Sterling Capital just called his cell phone and denied the bridge loan. He is in full panic mode, screaming that the bank is going to put a lien on their house by Monday morning if they do not secure a guarantor today. He looks at me with pure venom, demanding that I use whatever low-level connections I have at my firm to force the approval through. He tells me that I am going to sign the paper Cynthia brought, or he and Cynthia are walking out of the botanical garden right now. He uses his ultimate trump card, the one threat he thinks will break a daughter on her wedding day. He says if I do not save Spencer, they will leave me to walk down the aisle completely alone and embarrassment in front of all my wealthy new in-laws. I stand up slowly. My custom silk gown falls perfectly around me, catching the light streaming through the glass ceiling. The room falls dead silent. Even my biological parents freeze, sensing a shift in the atmosphere that they cannot quite comprehend. I look at the man who has spent my entire life making me feel small. I tell him that I am not signing anything to save a man who openly mocks my race and my background. I tell him that I am not lifting a single finger to save the house where I was treated like a second-class citizen for my entire childhood. I look Richard dead in the eye and tell him that his threat is completely useless. I inform him that he was never going to walk me down the aisle anyway. I explain that the honor of giving me away belongs to someone who actually acted like a parent, someone who invested in my mind and my future when my biological family was busy throwing me away. Richard's face contorts with rage. He takes a step toward me, raising his voice, telling me that I am an ungrateful child and that he will make sure Julian's family knows exactly how toxic and vindictive I really am. He threatens to march right out to the reception area and ruin my reputation among Atlanta's elite. I simply smile and raise my hand. Two massive private security guards step out from the shadows of the hallway, completely blocking Richard and Cynthia from moving another inch. I tell the guards to escort my biological parents back to their assigned seats in the very back row of the ceremony. I instruct them clearly that if Richard or Cynthia make a single sound or try to approach the altar, they are to be immediately removed from the botanical garden and handed over to the local police for trespassing. Cynthia begins to hyperventilate, clutching Richard's arm as the guards gently but firmly force them out of the bridal suite. The heavy wooden doors click shut behind them, leaving the room in perfect, peaceful silence once again. The lead wedding coordinator steps into the room holding a silver clipboard. She smiles warmly and tells me that the string quartet has begun playing the prelude, and it is time for the bridal party to line up. I take one last look in the mirror. I look powerful. I look untouchable. I pick up my bouquet of white orchids and walk out of the suite, heading toward the spectacular glass house where my future is waiting. I know my biological family is out there, seething in the back row, watching their golden child's false empire crumble. But they are not my focus anymore. I step into the sunlit corridor, ready to start my new life. The music swells, echoing through the lush tropical foliage of the botanical garden. The guests are seated, the cameras are flashing, and the atmosphere is electric with anticipation. But before I can even take my first step toward the altar, a sudden commotion breaks out at the front of the aisle. I watch the coordinator's face drop as she looks down the long aisle. The carefully orchestrated timing of my perfect wedding is being actively sabotaged. I do not need to guess who is causing the disruption. Jasmine has always believed she is the main character in every room she enters, and she simply cannot handle being a spectator today. She thinks this is her last chance to reclaim the spotlight and prove to Spencer's invisible old money friends that she is the true star of the family. She is desperate, broke, and wearing a cheap cocktail dress, but her entitlement is as loud as ever. I stand calmly at the back of the glass house, waiting for the inevitable clash, because I know exactly who is standing at the front of that aisle, ready to put Jasmine in her place once and for all. Camera. Action camera glides to the right, showing the reflection of Nia in a large mirror symbolizing her two lives, the scapegoat and the victor. The ceremony begins. The botanical garden is breathtaking. As the music starts, Jasmine, wearing a hastily bought white cocktail dress, tries to push past the wedding coordinator to walk down the aisle before me, desperate to steal the spotlight for her vow renewal. Suddenly, Victoria Sterling, my adoptive mother and the real matriarch of Atlanta, steps directly into the aisle, blocking Jasmine's path. Victoria is wearing a custom emerald gown and dripping in actual generational wealth. "Excuse me, little girl," Victoria says, her voice echoing over the string quartet. "The staff entrance is around the back." Jasmine gasps. "I am the bride's sister. My husband's family built Charleston." Victoria adjusts her diamond necklace. "Oh, Spencer's family. Yes, I know them. In fact, my real estate division just bought his grandfather's foreclosed plantation at auction this morning. We're turning it into a public parking lot." Jasmine's face drains of all color. The haughty, entitled sneer she has worn since childhood completely melts away, replaced by the hollow, wide-eyed stare of someone watching their entire fabricated reality collapse. The wealthy guests seated in the front rows, titans of industry and society elites, do not gasp or murmur. They simply watch with cold, detached amusement. In their world, there is nothing more vulgar than fake wealth, and Jasmine has just been exposed in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Spencer, who has been hovering near the floral archway trying to network with state senators, hears Victoria's pronouncement. He rushes over his seersucker suit, practically soaked in nervous sweat. He tries to puff out his chest, attempting to muster some sort of patrician outrage, but under Victoria Sterling's piercing gaze, he shrinks. He stammers, claiming there must be some kind of clerical error, that his family trust is ironclad. Victoria does not even deign to look at him. She simply waves a hand toward the private security detail standing discreetly near the garden entrance. My biological parents, Richard and Cynthia, are trapped in the very back row where my security guards place them. I can see them craning their necks, their faces tight with panic. They cannot intervene without risking immediate arrest, so they are forced to sit in silent agony as their golden child and her supposedly elite husband are publicly humiliated. Jasmine tries to speak again, her voice trembling, but Victoria cuts her off with surgical precision. "You are a guest at my daughter's wedding," Victoria says softly, yet her voice carries a terrifying weight. "You will take your seat in the back row with the rest of your enablers, or you will be escorted off the premises. There will be no vow renewal. There will be no stolen spotlight. You have played your last card." Jasmine bursts into furious, humiliated tears. She grabs Spencer's arm and practically drags him down the side aisle, retreating to the back row where Richard and Cynthia are waiting. They huddle together, a miserable, defeated cluster of toxic entitlement, entirely isolated from the radiant joy of the event. Victoria turns to me. The icy matriarch vanishes, and the warm, fiercely protective mother who saved me 8 years ago takes her place. She smiles, offering me her arm. I take it, feeling completely grounded and incredibly powerful. We walk down the aisle together. The string quartet shifts into a triumphant, swelling melody that perfectly matches the soaring feeling in my chest. I look ahead and see Julian waiting for me at the altar. He looks at me with such profound love and respect that the rest of the world simply fades away. The botanical garden around us is a vibrant sea of blooming orchids and lush greenery, sunlight filtering through the massive glass ceiling. But all I see is the man who built an empire with me. We exchange our vows, not with nervous hesitation, but with the absolute certainty of two people who have conquered every obstacle thrown in their path. When he kisses me, the entire glass house erupts in genuine thunderous applause. The reception is a masterpiece of elegance and celebration. We are surrounded by people who value ambition, integrity, and true partnership. I dance with my husband, I toast with my mentors, and I do not cast a single glance toward the dark corner where my biological family sits in agonizing silence. They are completely ignored by the high society guests they so desperately wanted to impress. No one wants to associate with the family of the man whose grandfather's estate was just turned into a public parking lot. Halfway through the evening, the final blow lands. I am standing near the champagne tower with Julian when I see Spencer frantically pacing near the garden exit, his cell phone pressed tightly to his ear. He is yelling, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. The fraud alerts I placed on my social security number have triggered. The federal authorities have not only frozen the fraudulent credit cards he tried to open, but they have also locked down his existing bank accounts pending a full investigation. He is completely financially paralyzed. Jasmine runs up to him demanding to know what is wrong. Spencer drops his phone, running his hands through his thinning hair, and screams that they have absolutely nothing left. He turns his furious gaze towards Cynthia and Richard, blaming them for the failed bridge loan, blaming them for the ruined dress, blaming them for his entire collapse. My biological family turns on each other like cornered animals. Cynthia is crying, Richard is yelling, Jasmine is having a full-blown tantrum, and Spencer is desperately trying to figure out how to avoid federal indictment. I watch them implode from across the room. I do not feel anger. I do not feel sorrow. I feel absolutely nothing for them. They spent my entire childhood telling me I was worthless, telling me I was a disappointment, telling me I did not belong. They threw me out into the cold because they thought I was a rock that would tarnish their precious diamond. But they were wrong. Julian wraps his arms around my waist, pulling my back against his chest. He rests his chin on my shoulder, watching the pathetic scene unfolding by the exit. The security guards finally approach the screaming group, gently but firmly escorting my biological family out of the botanical garden and into the humid Atlanta night. The heavy glass doors close behind them, shutting them out of my life forever. I turn in my husband's arms and look up into his eyes. The toxic weight I have carried since I was a little girl in that sprawling suburban home is completely gone. I am no longer the dark-skinned, smart girl who never fit their mold. I am Nia Sterling. I am a financial titan, a beloved daughter, a cherished wife, and the architect of my own extraordinary destiny. We walk back onto the dance floor, moving together in perfect harmony, leaving the past exactly where it belongs, in the dust. A collective gasp ripples through the ballroom. The clinking of fine crystal and the soft hum of sophisticated conversation vanish entirely. For a span of 10 seconds, the only sound in the massive glass house is the ambient hum of the air conditioning. Every single gaze in the room shifts from Julian standing effortlessly commanding on the stage to Spencer, who looks like he has just been struck by lightning. The color drains from Spencer's face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. His mouth opens and closes like a suffocating fish, but no words come out. My biological parents look as if the ground has just opened up beneath their feet. Richard slowly stands up from his table, his hands gripping the white linen cloth so tightly, his knuckles turned stark white. He looks at Spencer and then at Cynthia. The horrific reality of their situation is finally penetrating his thick skull. The fake signatures on the loan applications, the frantic demands for bridge loans, the missing retirement statements. It all snaps into devastating focus. Spencer tries to recover. He forces a loud barking laugh that echoes awkwardly in the silent room. He points a trembling finger at Julian and tries to project outrage. "This is a complete misunderstanding," Spencer shouts, his voice cracking under the pressure. "It is standard bridge financing. My accountants can explain everything. You are just trying to humiliate me because you are intimidated by my market projections." Julian does not even blink. He pulls a folded document from his jacket pocket and holds it up for the room to see. He speaks with the terrifying calm of a man who holds all the cards. "I am not intimidated by a man who uses his wife's childhood home as illegal collateral," Julian states smoothly. "Our auditors forwarded your entire file to the Securities and Exchange Commission this afternoon. They were very interested in the fake shell companies you set up using Cynthia and Richard's social security numbers." Cynthia lets out a sound that is half scream and half sob. She lunges across her table, grabbing Richard by the arm. She is hyperventilating, her carefully sprayed hair falling into her face as she realizes her entire life savings and her pristine suburban home are completely gone. Richard ignores her. He storms toward the stage, his face purple with absolute fury. He bypasses Julian entirely and grabs Spencer by the lapels of his cheap seersucker suit. Richard shakes the younger man violently, screaming that he trusted him, that he gave him everything, that he treated him like a real son. Jasmine is frozen in her chair. The realization that she is not a wealthy Charleston socialite, but the wife of a broke federal criminal hits her with the force of a freight train. She looks down at her ruined $10,000 dress and then looks around the room at the elite guests who are watching her family implode with cold, disgusted detachment. Her entire fabricated reality is burning to the ground. In a desperate, pathetic attempt to save herself, she turns toward my table. Jasmine runs across the dance floor, her heels slipping on the polished wood. She drops to her knees right beside my chair, grabbing my hands with tears streaming down her face. "Nia, you have to help us," she begs, her voice shrill and desperate. "You work for him. You are married to him. Tell him to drop the charges. Tell him to give us the loan. We are family, Nia. You cannot let them take our house. I will do anything. I will let you be my maid of honor when we redo my vows. Just please give Spencer the money." I look down at the sister who spent her entire life making sure I knew I was beneath her. I look at the woman who intentionally poured red wine over what she thought was my wedding dress just 24 hours ago. I gently pull my hands out of her desperate grip. I do not raise my voice. I do not show an ounce of the anger that defined my teenage years. I simply look at her with absolute freezing pity. "I am not going to save you, Jasmine," I say, my voice steady and clear. "You spent your whole life demanding that I know my place. Well, this is my place. And your place is dealing with the consequences of marrying a fraud. I am not your safety net, and I am certainly not your ATM." Before Jasmine can launch into another hysterical plea, the heavy mahogany doors at the back of the reception hall swing wide open. 4 uniformed federal agents walk into the room accompanied by local police officers. The private security detail parts seamlessly to let them through. They march directly toward the stage where Richard is still attempting to strangle Spencer. The officers quickly separate the two men. An agent steps forward and reads Spencer his rights, snapping cold metal handcuffs around his wrists, right in front of the state senators and corporate titans he had just tried to pitch. Spencer begins sobbing openly, begging Richard for help, begging Jasmine to call his lawyer, begging anyone in the room to vouch for him. No one moves. The wealthy guests simply turn their backs, sipping their vintage champagne, as the authorities march the disgraced fraudster out the door. Jasmine screams, running after the officers, crying for her husband. Richard and Cynthia follow closely behind her, their faces buried in their hands, completely humiliated and utterly destroyed. They do not look back at me. They do not apologize. They simply vanish into the humid Atlanta night, dragging their toxic entitlement with them. The heavy doors click shut, and the tension in the room instantly evaporates. The toxic elements have been permanently surgically removed from my life. Victoria walks over to my table, her emerald gown shimmering under the chandeliers. She looks at the door, then looks down at me with a brilliant, proud smile. She picks up her crystal champagne flute and taps it gently with a silver spoon. The ringing sound calls the room to attention. "To my beautiful, brilliant daughter, Nia Victoria," announces her voice, ringing clear and full of profound love. "And to my new son, Julian, may your marriage be built on truth, ambition, and the absolute certainty that real family is not defined by blood. Real family is defined by loyalty." The entire ballroom erupts in joyous applause. The string quartet strikes up a lively, upbeat tempo, and the dark shadow of my biological family is instantly washed away by the vibrant energy of the celebration. Julian steps down from the stage and walks over to me. He offers me his hand, pulling me up from my chair and wrapping his arms securely around my waist. He kisses me deeply, ignoring the cheering crowd entirely. We walk onto the dance floor together, moving perfectly in sync. I rest my head against his shoulder, looking around the room at the people who truly matter. I see mentors who guided me, friends who supported me, and a mother who chose me when my biological parents threw me away. I am no longer the scapegoat. I am no longer the dark-skinned girl trying to fit into a mold that was meant to crush me. I am a woman who built an empire from the ground up. I am a victor who secured her own justice without ever having to raise her voice. As the music swells and the night stretches on, filled with laughter and dancing, I realize that the greatest revenge was never about destroying them. The greatest revenge was realizing that they were completely insignificant to my happiness. My biological family traded their entire future for a fleeting illusion of status. They bet on a rock and lost everything. I bet on my own brilliance and I won the world. I pulled Julian closer, closing my eyes and stepping into the rest of my beautiful, extraordinary life. The silence in the room is absolute. The crystal chandeliers seem to stop glittering as the weight of my words crashes down on Richard. The dark red flush of anger drains from his face, leaving him a sickly pale gray. He stares at the official court seal on the document in my hand, as if it is a venomous snake. He opens his mouth, but the bluster is completely gone, replaced by a dry, terrified wheeze. Cynthia breaks the quiet. She lets out a shrill, piercing sound that is entirely inappropriate for a polite society function. She stumbles forward, gripping the edge of my sweetheart table with shaking hands. She accuses me of being an ungrateful monster. She screams that she gave me the best years of her life, that she sacrificed everything to raise me in a luxury Buckhead estate, and this is how I repay her. I look down at her white knuckles gripping the silk tablecloth. I remind her that she made me sleep in the unfinished basement with exposed insulation so Jasmine could turn the second bedroom into a walk-in shoe closet. I remind her that she charged me market-rate rent the literal morning of my 18th birthday, while allowing Spencer to live in their guest house for free for 3 years. I state these facts loudly and clearly. The state senators and corporate executives at the surrounding tables shake their heads in pure disgust. Cynthia shrinks back, her face burning with public shame as the elite society she worships collectively rejects her. Richard tries to salvage his shattered pride. He pivots his anger away from me and targets Victoria. He points a trembling finger at the woman who saved my life. He accuses Victoria of poaching his daughter, of using her billions to buy a family because she could not keep her own husband. Victoria does not even stand up. She remains seated at the VIP table, casually sipping her sparkling water. She looks at Richard with the clinical detachment of someone inspecting a cockroach on the bottom of her shoe. She tells Richard that she did not buy a daughter. She says she simply salvaged a brilliant diamond that he was using as a footstool. She then gracefully checks her diamond-encrusted watch and mentions that the federal authorities should be arriving right about now. Spencer hears the word authorities and completely loses his mind. The arrogant tech bro facade shatters into a million pathetic pieces. He drops to his knees on the polished hardwood floor right in front of Julian. He begs Julian to retract the audit. He pleads that it was just a temporary reallocation of funds, that he was going to put the money back before anyone noticed. He points a frantic, shaking finger at Richard and screams that it was all Richard's idea. The entire ballroom gasps. Cynthia whips her head around to stare at her husband. Spencer is sobbing now, his seersucker suit completely soaked in sweat. He confesses loudly to the entire room that Richard knew about the forged signature on the house deed. Spencer screams that Richard forged Cynthia's name on the collateral documents to secure the initial seed money for the fake tech startup. Richard wanted a cut of the profits so badly that he secretly bet his wife's entire 30-year safety net on a Ponzi scheme without telling her a single thing. Cynthia unleashes a scream of pure visceral horror. She lunges at Richard, striking him across the face with her expensive beaded handbag. She shrieks that he ruined them, that he threw away their home for a lazy, entitled con artist. Richard tries to grab her wrists, shouting that he was only trying to secure their legacy because Jasmine refused to marry a man with an actual job. They are physically fighting in the middle of my wedding reception, destroying whatever tiny shred of dignity they had left. Jasmine is completely frozen. Her perfect vow renewal fantasy has turned into a brutal public interrogation. She looks at Spencer sobbing on the floor, and then at her parents brawling in front of Atlanta's elite. She realizes she has absolutely nothing. No rich husband, no family money, no social status. She is just a woman, in a ruined white dress, standing in a puddle of spilled wine. She takes 3 large steps backward, shaking her head in complete denial. I step out from behind the table. I look down at Spencer and deliver the final financial death blow. I inform him that since Julian formally denied the bridge loan, Sterling Capital automatically triggered the default clause on his existing debts. I tell him that my real estate division purchased his outstanding loans at noon today. I own his debt. I own the collateral. I look at Cynthia and Richard and calmly inform them that they have exactly 30 days to vacate the Buckhead property before my demolition crew arrives to level it to the ground. The heavy oak doors of the driving club swing open. 6 federal agents in dark windbreakers march into the room. The private security detail steps aside, allowing them clear passage to the center of the floor. The lead agent approaches Spencer, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. He announces that Spencer is under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and grand larceny. Spencer thrashes on the floor, crying for Jasmine to call a lawyer. Jasmine actually tells the federal agents she has no idea who this man is and tries to blend into the crowd of disgusted guests. Richard tries to run. He makes a sudden, desperate dash toward the kitchen service doors. 2 agents tackle him to the ground before he makes it 5 feet. They cuff him alongside his golden son-in-law, reading him his rights regarding conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery. Julian walks up behind me and places his hands on my shoulders, pulling me against his chest. We watch the authorities clear the trash from our wedding reception. Cynthia drops to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably as she watches her husband and her son-in-law being dragged out of the exclusive club in chains. The room slowly returns to order. The musicians pick up their instruments and begin a lively, triumphant jazz tune. Victoria raises her glass to me from across the room, winking proudly. I turn to face my husband, ready to enjoy the rest of our beautiful, flawless evening, knowing my past can never hurt me again. A sharp scream cuts through the jazz music. I turn back to see Cynthia pulling herself up from the floor. She is pointing a shaking manicured finger at the doorway where the agents just disappeared. She turns her wild, desperate eyes toward me and screams that she will not let me take her house. She claims she has a secret that will completely destroy my precious new family and shouts that she knows exactly why Victoria Sterling was at that Buckhead steakhouse 8 years ago, and it was not a coincidence. Spencer stares at Victoria with a vacant, glassy expression as the sheer magnitude of his ruin finally penetrates his arrogance. His knees literally buckle. He collapses onto the polished marble floor of the reception hall, his pristine seersucker suit crumpling around him. He gasps for air, clutching at his chest as he babbles incoherently about his grandfather, his legacy, and his country club memberships. The elite guests surrounding us do not offer a single ounce of sympathy. They look down at him with the cold, detached disgust reserved for a pest that has scuttled across a dining table. Jasmine stares at the pathetic man crying on the floor. For a fraction of a second, I wonder if she will actually stand by her husband in his darkest hour. Instead, she does exactly what a lifetime of toxic entitlement has conditioned her to do. She kicks him. The sharp point of her designer heel strikes Spencer in the shin. She screams at him, her voice cracking with pure hysterical rage. She demands to know where her money is, where her lifestyle went, and how he could possibly be stupid enough to get caught. She rips her diamond engagement ring off her finger and throws it directly at his face. She turns wildly toward Richard and Cynthia, expecting them to fix the disaster, just like they have fixed every other mistake she has ever made. But Richard is not looking at Jasmine. He is staring at his own hands, which are shaking so violently he cannot keep them still. The reality of Victoria's statement is tearing through his mind. The bridge loan was fake. The startup was a Ponzi scheme. The retirement accounts are completely drained. Richard lets out a guttural, animalistic roar and lunges past Jasmine, throwing himself directly at Spencer. Private security intercepts Richard immediately, grabbing his arms and pinning him back. Richard thrashes against the guards, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He screams that Spencer ruined them, that he stole everything they worked for, that he is going to kill him. Spencer cowers on the floor, crying out for someone to call his father, unaware that his father is likely facing the exact same federal auditors at this very moment. Seeing her husband physically restrained and her son-in-law sobbing on the floor, Cynthia finally breaks. She abandons the aggressive matriarch persona entirely and drops back into the fragile victim act she weaponized throughout my childhood. She pushes past the security guards and rushes toward my sweetheart table, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. She clasps her hands together in a desperate pleading gesture. "Nia, please," she begs, her voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. "You have to help us. Your father is having a medical episode. We have nothing left. You have Victoria now. You have Julian. You have access to billions of dollars. You can replace the retirement funds Spencer stole. It is just a drop in the bucket for Sterling Capital. We are your real family, Nia. You cannot just stand there and watch us lose everything." I look down at the woman who gave birth to me. I feel no anger, no sorrow, no obligation. I feel absolute zero. I place my hands flat on the table and lean forward slightly, speaking with a calm that freezes her in her tracks. "You want me to replace the funds you willingly handed to a racist fraudster?" I ask, my voice echoing clearly through the silent room. "You want me to bail you out after you spent my entire life treating me like a disease? You threw me out on Thanksgiving because I refused to subsidize Jasmine's lifestyle. You told me I was a failure because I did not fit your incredibly narrow, toxic definition of success. I am not your safety net, Cynthia. I am the woman who beat you. I will not give you a single red cent." Right on cue, the heavy oak doors at the back of the reception hall swing wide open. 4 federal agents wearing dark suits and carrying official badges walk into the room, accompanied by local Atlanta police. Julian had tipped off the authorities the moment his auditors confirmed the wire fraud. The agents march purposefully across the ballroom, parting the sea of wealthy guests. They walk straight up to the stage and haul Spencer to his feet. An agent spins Spencer around, pulling his arms behind his back and snapping cold steel handcuffs onto his wrists. He recites the charges loud enough for the entire room to hear: wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit grand larceny, and federal tax evasion. Spencer begs Jasmine to call their lawyers. Jasmine completely ignores him, turning her back and staring blankly at the floral centerpieces. As the agents begin to march Spencer toward the exit, I look directly at Richard and Cynthia. I deliver the final financial death blow. I inform them that because Spencer used their Buckhead estate as collateral for his fraudulent shell companies, the bank has officially seized the property. I tell them that since Victoria's real estate division just acquired that specific bank, we now own their house. I instruct them clearly that they have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises before my demolition crew arrives to level it to the ground. Richard slumps against the security guards, completely broken. Cynthia covers her face and begins to sob uncontrollably, the reality of her new, destitute life finally crushing her. Jasmine stands alone, isolated and discarded by the very society she worshipped. The security detail gently but firmly herds the 3 of them toward the exit, following right behind the federal agents who are dragging Spencer away. They walk out into the humid Atlanta night, stripped of their wealth, their status, and their toxic pride. The heavy doors click shut behind them, sealing them out of my life forever. The stifling tension in the room instantly vanishes, replaced by a wave of collective relief. Victoria walks up to our table, her eyes shining with fierce maternal pride. She raises her champagne flute to me and then to Julian. She toasts to truth, to justice, and to the kind of family you choose for yourself. The entire ballroom erupts in thunderous applause. The string quartet immediately shifts into a lively, joyful melody, and the atmosphere transforms back into a spectacular celebration. Julian takes my hand and leads me to the center of the dance floor. He pulls me close, his arms wrapping securely around my waist. We move together in perfect harmony, surrounded by people who value integrity, ambition, and genuine love. I rest my head against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. I am no longer the scapegoat. I am no longer the unwanted child hiding in the shadows of a family that hated me. I am Nia Sterling. I am a titan, a victor, and a woman completely in control of her own destiny. I close my eyes, stepping fully into the beautiful, brilliant future I built with my own 2 hands. The glass house becomes so exceptionally quiet that you can hear the ice shifting and melting inside the silver champagne buckets. Jasmine's fake, fragile tears instantly evaporate. Her hands, which were delicately cradling her supposedly pregnant stomach just seconds ago, drop heavily to her sides like lead weights. The elite guests who have maintained a veneer of polite detachment until this very second collectively gasp. A prominent state senator at the table nearest to the stage actually drops his salad fork, letting it clatter loudly against his china plate. Cynthia's jaw completely unhinges. She looks from Spencer to Jasmine, her perfectly contoured face twisting into a hideous mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. She tries to process the sheer magnitude of the insult Spencer just delivered, layered right on top of the sickening realization that her golden daughter is trying to pass off another man's child as a sterling heir. Richard drops Jasmine's arm as if she has suddenly caught fire. He stumbles backward, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disgust. Jasmine stammers, her eyes darting frantically around the room, looking for an exit, an excuse, a lifeline that no longer exists. She tries to play it off, claiming Spencer is lying to save face, that he is just trying to hurt her because he is going to federal prison. But Spencer is miles past the point of protecting anyone's reputation, especially hers. He cannot reach into his jacket to retrieve his phone because of the steel handcuffs locking his wrists behind his back, so he just screams the ugly truth for the entire ballroom of Atlanta elites to hear. He yells that he has known about her affair for 4 months. He screams the full name of the man she has been sleeping with, revealing him to be the senior underwriting officer at Sterling Capital, the exact same man who called Richard earlier today to deny their emergency bridge loan. Spencer laughs, a manic, broken, terrifying sound that echoes sharply off the glass walls of the botanical garden. He tells Richard that the bridge loan was not denied just because of the fraudulent paperwork and the Ponzi scheme. It was denied because the loan officer found out Jasmine was trying to use their illicit affair to secure capital for her husband's failing fake company. Richard physically recoils. He clutches his chest, staggering backward into a tall cocktail table, sending crystal glasses and floral arrangements shattering to the polished hardwood floor. The realization hits him with the blunt force of a physical blow. His entire financial ruin, the loss of his ancestral home, the destruction of his social legacy, and his impending arrest were all entirely orchestrated by the daughter he worshipped. He gave Jasmine everything. He funded her lavish lifestyle, he co-signed her husband's fraudulent loans, and he allowed her to treat me like a servant in my own home for 18 years. In return, she bankrupted him and publicly humiliated him in front of the most powerful people in the state. Cynthia, unable to process the total, absolute destruction of her perfect suburban fantasy, does exactly what she has always done. She frantically looks for a scapegoat. She turns her wild, furious eyes toward me. She lunges forward, her manicured hands curled into claws, screaming that I orchestrated this entire nightmare. She accuses me of hacking Spencer's bank accounts, of paying the loan officer to sleep with Jasmine, of staging this entire lavish wedding just to destroy her family. Julian steps smoothly in front of me, his broad shoulders instantly shielding me from her erratic, violent approach. But I place a gentle hand on his arm and step out to face her myself. I am not the frightened teenager who used to hide in her unfinished basement room to escape Cynthia's unpredictable wrath. I look her dead in the eye, my voice slicing through her hysterical screams with absolute sub-zero calm. I tell her I did not need to orchestrate a single thing. I remind her of the day I graduated high school as valedictorian, the day she flatly refused to attend my ceremony because Jasmine had a minor allergic reaction to a cheap facial peel and needed her hand held. I tell Cynthia that on that day, she looked at me and said I was too independent, too cold, and that I would never understand the importance of family loyalty. I tell her that she was absolutely right. I will never understand her kind of loyalty, the kind that demands absolute submission to a toxic failing system. I tell her that she built a fragile house of cards on a foundation of lies, and I simply refuse to be the joker holding it up anymore. Cynthia gasps for air, her face blotchy and wet with ruined makeup. She looks desperately around the room, making eye contact with the wealthy socialites she spent her entire life trying to impress. They look back at her with sheer, unapologetic revulsion. She has no power here. She has no power over me. The federal agents, having given Spencer enough time to thoroughly incriminate himself and humiliate his in-laws, finally tug harshly on his handcuffs. They march him toward the exit. Jasmine tries to follow him, crying hysterically, but Spencer spits a curse at her and tells her to stay away from him. Jasmine turns wildly to Richard, begging her father for help, begging him to call his lawyers, begging for his credit card to book a hotel room. Richard looks at his golden child. His face is entirely devoid of emotion. He tells her he has no lawyers left. He tells her his credit cards are frozen by the federal government. He turns his back on Jasmine, the daughter he ruined me to protect, and walks voluntarily toward the federal agents waiting to arrest him without looking at her again. Cynthia follows him, her shoulders slumped, her entire identity erased in the span of 20 minutes. Jasmine is left standing alone in the center of the room, crying into her hands, utterly abandoned by the parents who taught her exactly how to abandon others. Private security guards gently but firmly guide Jasmine out the door, her cheap cocktail dress dragging sadly on the floor. The heavy mahogany doors close with a solid, echoing thud. They are gone. The silence lingers for a brief moment before Victoria steps up to the microphone on the stage. She does not acknowledge the chaotic criminal exit. She simply smiles, radiating the warm, commanding energy of a true matriarch. She tells the guests that the evening's unscheduled entertainment has concluded and invites everyone to return to the dance floor to celebrate the union of two people who built their empires on hard work and genuine integrity. The band immediately launches into an upbeat, soulful jazz number. The heavy tension shatters instantly, replaced by the joyful clinking of glasses and the vibrant hum of a party that has just been reinvigorated. Julian takes my hand, raising it to his lips and kissing my knuckles. He looks at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated pride. We walk to the center of the dance floor, moving perfectly in sync. For the first time in my entire life, I feel completely weightless. The burden of my biological family's expectations, their constant belittling, their relentless attempts to make me feel small, is permanently gone. I am surrounded by people who celebrate my brilliance, who value my strength, and who love me unconditionally. I am a partner in a formidable marriage, an executive at a massive firm, and the beloved daughter of a woman who chose me. Later that evening, as the magnificent reception begins to wind down, Julian and I step out onto the expansive stone balcony overlooking the illuminated botanical gardens. The cool night air feels incredibly refreshing. Julian wraps his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. He tells me that he has one final wedding gift for me. He pulls a sleek silver keycard from his tuxedo pocket and places it in the palm of my hand. He explains that while my biological parents have 30 days to vacate their foreclosed Buckhead estate, they will not be taking any of the custom furniture, the artwork, or the luxury vehicles. He tells me that he legally purchased the entire estate's contents at a private municipal auction yesterday. He smiles, his eyes glinting with a mischievous light, and tells me that I can do whatever I want with the physical remnants of my miserable childhood. I look down at the silver keycard, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. I turn to my husband, wrapping my arms around his neck, feeling a profound sense of closure. I tell him exactly what I want to do. I tell him we are going to donate every single piece of designer furniture, every expensive painting, and every luxury item in that house to the local domestic violence and youth homeless shelters. We are going to strip that toxic house bare and use its hollow prestige to help people who actually need it. Julian laughs, kissing me deeply under the starlit sky. He tells me it is the perfect plan for the perfect bride. As we walk back inside to join the final hours of our reception, I know with absolute certainty that the girl who slept in the unfinished basement is gone forever. I am Nia Sterling, and my real life has just begun. But as we cross the threshold back into the ballroom, Victoria approaches us, holding her phone tightly. Her usual composed, elegant expression has shifted into a tight, calculating frown. She pulls me aside, her eyes darting around to ensure no one is listening to us. She tells me that her head of security just intercepted a frantic phone call from Cynthia. Cynthia is currently standing outside the main gates of the botanical garden, refusing to leave, screaming that she has proof Victoria orchestrated the entire collapse of Spencer's company from the very beginning. Victoria looks at me, her gaze piercing and dead serious. She says Cynthia is holding a flash drive containing security footage from 8 years ago, footage that proves my adoption was not a random act of kindness, but the final phase of a decade-long corporate war. The silence that follows Cynthia's confession is so absolute, it feels like the oxygen has been sucked out of the room. Richard stands completely paralyzed. His eyes bulge as he stares at the woman he has been married to for over 30 years. The veins in his neck pulse furiously against his stiff white collar. He thought his financial ruin was solely the fault of his grifter son-in-law. Now he realizes the fatal blow was struck by his own wife. A secret second mortgage. Richard repeats, his voice dropping to a terrifying, raspy whisper. You forged my signature on a second mortgage to buy a baby for a marriage that was built on a Ponzi scheme. Cynthia shrinks back against the sweetheart table, her hands trembling as she clutches her expensive pearl necklace. She tries to justify it, her voice shrill and desperate. She babbles about how society expected a grandchild, about how the Sterling family was getting all the press, and about how she had to protect their social standing. She actually uses the phrase return on investment when referring to Jasmine's fake pregnancy. Spencer, still kneeling on the marble floor with his wrists cuffed behind his back, lets out a harsh, barking laugh. It is a sound of pure broken hysteria. He looks up at his mother-in-law with eyes full of malicious glee. You stupid, desperate woman, Spencer sneers, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the polished floor. You didn't pay for IVF. You gave Jasmine that cash, and she blew it on designer bags and a private suite in Mykonos. There was no donor. There was no clinic. Jasmine got pregnant the old-fashioned way. She slept with the senior loan officer at Sterling Capital to bribe him into approving my fraudulent bridge loan. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd of Atlanta's most powerful elites. Several socialites physically cover their mouths. Others pull out their phones, openly recording the utter destruction of the once mighty family. Jasmine lets out an ear-piercing shriek. She lunges at Spencer, her manicured nails aimed right at his face, but a federal agent easily steps in her path, shoving her back by the shoulder. She stumbles, her expensive silk dress tearing loudly as she catches her heel in the hem. She falls hard onto the ground, landing right in the puddle of spilled wine and shattered glass from the flute she just threw. Richard looks down at his golden daughter covered in wine and entirely stripped of her dignity. Then he looks at his wife, whose greed and vanity have literally left him homeless. Something inside Richard snaps permanently. The last shred of his arrogant country club patriarch persona disintegrates. He turns towards Cynthia, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. I am filing for divorce the second I leave this building. Richard snarls, his voice echoing through the silent ballroom. You forged my name. You stole my equity. You are going to take the fall for the bank fraud right alongside that pathetic excuse for a man. He points a trembling finger at Spencer. Cynthia lets out a wail of absolute despair. She drops to her knees, grabbing Richard's pant leg, begging him not to leave her, sobbing that she has no money, no credit, and nowhere to go. Richard violently kicks his leg free, sending her sprawling onto the floor next to Jasmine. I stand behind my table, watching the chaotic, miserable spectacle unfold. For 18 years, these people told me I was the defective one. They locked me in an unfinished basement, fed me scraps, and treated my very existence as a stain on their perfect family portrait. They told me I would amount to nothing while they poured every ounce of their love and resources into Jasmine. Now they are rolling around on the floor in front of the entire city, tearing each other apart for the scraps of a fake empire. I step forward, the soft rustle of my wedding gown drawing the attention of the entire room. I look down at Cynthia, who is sobbing so hard her false eyelashes are peeling off her face. You should have read the fine print on that second mortgage, Cynthia, I say, my voice carrying a lethal, icy calm. You took that loan from Vanguard Trust. It was a predatory lender known for issuing high-risk capital to desperate socialites with terrible credit. What you failed to realize is that Sterling Capital acquired Vanguard Trust's entire asset portfolio 3 weeks ago. Cynthia stops crying, her breath hitching in her throat as she stares up at me in terror. I personally audited your file. I continue, letting a slow, victorious smile spread across my face. You defaulted on the payments the very first month. The grace period expired yesterday, which means as of this morning, my real estate division holds the deed to your Buckhead estate. You do not have 30 days to vacate. You have 0 days. The locks are already being changed. Richard lets out a strangled gasp, clutching his chest as he stumbles backward into a floral arrangement. Jasmine covers her ears, shaking her head back and forth, refusing to accept the reality of her total poverty. Victoria Sterling rises from her seat at the VIP table. She walks toward me with the effortless grace of a true titan, her presence commanding absolute respect from every single person in the room. She stops beside me, placing a warm, supportive hand on my shoulder. She looks down at the ruined family on the floor with a gaze so cold it could freeze the sun. The authorities have all the documentation they need, Victoria announces smoothly, signaling to the lead federal agent. I believe this venue has a strict policy against trespassing. Please remove the garbage from my daughter's reception. The lead agent nods respectfully to Victoria. He hauls Spencer up by his collar, dragging the weeping fraudster toward the heavy oak doors. 2 local police officers step forward, grabbing Richard by the arms. Richard does not even fight them. He walks out like a zombie, his eyes vacant, his entire life erased. Cynthia and Jasmine are left sitting in the spilled wine. A female security guard approaches them firmly, instructing them to stand up and leave the premises immediately. Cynthia tries to reach out to me one last time. She cries out my name, begging me to remember that she gave birth to me, pleading for just enough money to rent an apartment. I look at her without a single ounce of pity. You gave birth to me, I reply, my voice echoing with finality. But Victoria raised me. She taught me how to win. Now get out of my sight before I have you arrested for trespassing. The security guards pull Cynthia and Jasmine to their feet. The mother and daughter, stripped of their wealth, their home, their fake baby, and their pride, are marched out of the ballroom in utter disgrace. The heavy wooden doors slam shut behind them, sealing them out of my life forever. The silence in the ballroom lasts for exactly 3 seconds. Then Julian steps up beside me. He does not say a word. He simply wraps his arms around my waist, pulling me firmly against his chest, grounding me in his strength and absolute devotion. Victoria turns to the crowd, raising her crystal champagne flute high in the air. To truth, she declares, her voice ringing with triumphant joy, to justice, and to the unstoppable power of a woman who refuses to be broken. The entire room erupts into deafening applause. The state senators, the tech CEOs, the elite investors, they all rise to their feet, giving me a standing ovation. The string quartet strikes up a lively, triumphant jazz chord, and the oppressive tension that hung over the room shatters completely. The air feels crisp, clean, and electric. Julian spins me around, his dark eyes shining with overwhelming love and pride. He leans down, pressing a gentle, lingering kiss against my lips. When he pulls away, he smiles, a real, genuine smile that reaches the corners of his eyes. You were magnificent, Julian whispers, his forehead resting against mine. You burned their toxic empire to the ground without lifting a single finger. You just let their own greed destroy them. They built the fire, I reply, smiling back at him. I just locked the doors. We walk hand in hand to the center of the dance floor. The guests part for us, offering respectful nods and warm congratulations. There is no pity in their eyes, only deep admiration. They know they are looking at the new reigning power couple of the corporate world. We begin to dance, moving in perfect rhythm to the music. As I rest my head against Julian's chest, I look over his shoulder and catch Victoria's eye. She is standing by the grand window, watching us with a soft maternal smile. She gives me a slow, proud wink. I nod back at her, a silent thank you for everything she has done for the empire she helped me build, and for the unconditional love she freely gave when my biological family offered nothing but cruelty. The girl who was forced to sleep in the cold, unfinished basement is gone. The teenager who was starved of affection and treated like a servant has been entirely erased. In her place stands a titan. I have the love of a brilliant, devoted husband. I have the backing of a fiercely protective billionaire mother, I have the respect of my peers, the control of a massive financial empire, and the absolute certainty that my future belongs solely to me. I close my eyes, letting the music wash over me completely at peace. The revenge is finished. The past is dead. The victory is sweet, but the life I am going to build from this moment forward will be even sweeter. The absolute silence in the ballroom stretches into a suffocating vacuum. Cynthia stares at Julian, her tear-streaked face frozen in a grotesque mask of incomprehension. Her brain, hardwired to worship patriarchal authority and traditional power structures, simply cannot process the words. She looks from Julian's amused, relaxed posture to my cold, unyielding stance. The realization hits her with the force of a high-speed freight train. She is not begging a powerful husband to control his erratic wife. She is kneeling on a marble floor in a ruined designer gown, begging the sole owner of a multi-billion-dollar financial empire to spare her miserable life. Richard lets out a sound that resembles a dying animal. He staggers backward, his hands clutching his chest, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The man who spent his entire life measuring his worth by his bank account and his absolute dominance over women has just been rendered completely obsolete. His son-in-law is a federal criminal. His wife is a fraudster. And the daughter he banished to an unfinished basement now holds his literal survival in the palm of her hand. I step out from the shelter of Julian's arm. I walk slowly around the sweetheart table, the heavy silk of my wedding dress whispering against the floor. I look down at Cynthia. She is still on her knees, her hands trembling violently, her expensive pearl necklace hanging askew across her collarbone. You spent 30 years worshipping money and status, Cynthia. I say, making sure my voice carries to the absolute back of the silent room. You taught Jasmine that a woman's only value was the wealth of the man she married. You tried to force me into that same pathetic mold. You told me I was broken because I wanted to build my own table instead of begging for a seat at someone else's. I crouch down so I am perfectly level with her terrified wide eyes. I built the table, Mom. I bought the building it sits in. I own the bank that holds the mortgage on the building. You and Richard are nothing but a bad investment that I am finally writing off. Cynthia tries to grab my hand, her fingers clawing frantically at the air. She sobs a loud, ugly, visceral sound. She begs me to remember that she is my mother. She pleads that she gave me life, that she sacrificed her body for me, that I owe her the basic dignity of a roof over her head. I pull back, standing up to my full height, brushing off my dress where her fingers brushed the fabric. You lost the right to call yourself my mother the day you started charging me rent to sleep in a room with exposed fiberglass insulation. I reply, my tone hitting absolute zero. You lost the right to my loyalty the day you forged Richard's signature to buy a fake baby for your golden child. The only thing I owe you is the exact same amount of compassion you showed me, which is absolutely zero. Richard suddenly snaps out of his catatonic shock. Pure, unadulterated desperation overrides his remaining pride. He pushes past a private security guard and stumbles toward me. He holds up his hands in a frantic, placating gesture. Nia, listen to me, Richard begs, his voice cracking with panic. I will give you everything. I will testify against Spencer. I will give the federal agents all of his offshore routing numbers. I have emails, text messages, wire transfer receipts. I will hand over everything I have on him to the SEC. Just let me keep my pension. Just give me a small condo in the city. I am your father, Nia, please. The elite guests murmur in open disgust. A father offering to sell his golden son-in-law to the federal government in exchange for a cheap condo, the ultimate display of the Addams family loyalty. Julian steps up beside me again, his presence a solid, comforting weight. He looks at Richard with an expression of pure clinical disdain. We do not need your testimony, Mr. Addams, Julian states smoothly. Sterling Capital's forensic accounting team already provided the SEC with a comprehensive 300-page dossier on Spencer's fraudulent activities. We handed them the routing numbers yesterday morning. You have absolutely nothing of value left to trade. Richard's mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. He looks like a fish suffocating on dry land. He turns to look at Victoria, who is watching the entire scene from her VIP table while casually sipping sparkling water. Victoria sets her glass down on the crisp white tablecloth. She gives a subtle, sharp nod to the head of my private security detail. The time for talking is officially over. Take out the trash, Victoria commands, her voice echoing with elegant, lethal authority. 6 heavily muscled security guards immediately converge on Cynthia and Richard. They grab my biological parents by their arms, hauling them forcefully toward the heavy oak doors of the ballroom. Cynthia kicks and screams, her heels scratching against the marble, shrieking that she will sue us, that she will go to the press, that she will destroy my reputation in Atlanta. Let her go to the press, I call out after her, my voice ringing clear and triumphant. Tell them exactly how a billionaire CEO evicted the mother who abused her. The media loves a self-made success story. Richard does not fight. He hangs his head, allowing the guards to drag him out of the room. He is completely broken, his spirit crushed under the heavy weight of his own monumental arrogance. The heavy mahogany doors swing shut behind them with a loud, definitive thud. The Addams family has been completely excised from my life. The ballroom remains silent for 3 long seconds. The elite guests, the politicians, the corporate titans, all stand frozen, processing the absolute masterclass in power and retribution they just witnessed. Then Victoria begins to clap. Slow, measured, deliberate applause. Julian joins in, his dark eyes shining with intense pride. Within seconds, the entire room erupts into a deafening standing ovation. The applause bounces off the glass ceiling, a thunderous validation of my victory. The string quartet immediately transitions into a lively, triumphant jazz piece, washing away the toxic residue of my former family. I turn to face Julian. He wraps his arms tightly around my waist, lifting me effortlessly off the floor and spinning me around. I laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that I have never truly felt before. He sets me down and kisses me deeply, a promise of a future built on respect, partnership, and unconditional love. You did it, Julian whispers against my lips. You excised the poison, you own everything. I look over his shoulder and see Victoria walking toward us. She looks radiant, her sharp features softened by genuine maternal affection. She pulls me into a tight embrace, resting her cheek against my hair. Welcome to the head of the table, Nia, Victoria says quietly, her voice full of fierce pride. You earned every single piece of this empire. I pull back, looking at the woman who saved me, who taught me how to fight, who handed me the keys to a kingdom. I am ready to lead, I reply, my voice steady and completely certain. But as the celebration resumes around us, I notice a subtle tension tightening the corners of Victoria's eyes. She glances toward the heavy oak doors where Cynthia was just dragged out. She touches the diamond brooch at her collar, a rare nervous habit I have only seen her display when calculating a major corporate hostile takeover. Victoria, I say, my tone shifting to a serious questioning register. Before Cynthia was thrown out, she was screaming something at the gates, something about security footage from 8 years ago, something about a corporate war. Julian's posture stiffens slightly. He exchanges a rapid, unreadable glance with his mother. Victoria takes a slow breath, her gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that makes the ambient noise of the party fade into the background. She reaches out and takes both of my hands in hers. Cynthia is a desperate, pathetic woman. Victoria begins, her voice dropping to a low conspiratorial murmur. But she is not entirely wrong. Your adoption was not a coincidence, Nia. It was never a coincidence. I did not just find you. I targeted your father's original company, and I targeted his family to take back something he stole from me a very long time ago. Spencer violently thrashes against the federal agents, his face turning a mottled, furious purple. He screams obscenities, spit flying from his lips, but the agents are relentless. They slam him face first onto the polished mahogany sweetheart table, right into the center of the ruined wedding cake. The sickening crunch of frosting and crystal plates shatters the dead silence of the ballroom. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicks shut with a harsh, undeniable finality. Jasmine backs away slowly, her hands raised in sheer terror. The flawless, confident persona she wore all evening melts away, leaving a pathetic, trembling shell. She looks at the agents, then at her husband pinned against the table. I have nothing to do with this, Jasmine shrieks, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. I am just his wife. I did not know anything about his business. He lied to me. He used me. Spencer jerks his head up, icing smeared across his bruised cheek. His eyes lock onto Jasmine with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He is going down, but he absolutely refuses to go down alone. "You lying, manipulative coward!" Spencer snarls, struggling against the agents holding him down. "You knew exactly what we were doing. You forged Richard's signature on the secondary loan documents right next to me in our kitchen. And when the bridge loan was about to be denied, you went to the Sterling Capital senior loan officer's hotel room and slept with him to guarantee the approval." The collective gasp from the elite guests is deafening. A prominent state senator at the table nearest to the stage drops his salad fork, letting it clatter loudly against his china plate. Phones are out everywhere, recording the complete spectacular destruction of the Addams family. Cynthia's jaw unhinges. She looks from Spencer to Jasmine, her perfectly contoured face twisting into a hideous mask of pure confusion. She tries to process the sheer magnitude of the insult Spencer just delivered, layered right on top of the sickening realization that her golden daughter is a total fraud. "Spencer, shut your mouth!" Cynthia screams, stepping forward to shield her daughter from the cameras. "My daughter is pregnant with your child. She is carrying the Addams heir." I do not even raise my voice, but my words slice through the chaos like a razor blade. "She is not pregnant, Cynthia. There was no IVF clinic. There was no donor. Jasmine took the cash from your secret second mortgage, funneled it through a shell company, and used it to cover the massive margin calls on Spencer's failing cryptocurrency accounts. She used your house to buy herself another 6 months of pretending to be rich." Jasmine wildly shakes her head, backing away until she hits the edge of the stage. But the lead federal agent pulls a secondary document from his jacket pocket. "Jasmine Hayes," the agent says, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We also have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include conspiracy to commit wire fraud, accessory to identity theft, and money laundering." Two female agents step out from the crowd and grab Jasmine by the arms. She thrashes violently, her expensive designer gown ripping at the seam. She cries out for her father, begging Richard to do something, begging him to call his lawyers, begging him to fix it. Richard stands completely paralyzed. The veins in his neck pulse furiously against his stiff white collar. He looks at his daughter, the golden child he worshipped, the girl he sacrificed his other daughter to elevate. He looks at his wife, the woman who forged his name and gambled away their ancestral home just to maintain a fake social standing. The realization hits him with the blunt force of a physical blow. He is ruined. He is homeless. His legacy is a federal crime scene. Richard physically recoils from Jasmine as if she has suddenly caught fire. "I have no lawyers left," Richard says, his voice dropping to a terrifying, raspy whisper. "You bankrupt me. You and your mother forged my name. I am filing for divorce the second I leave this building, and I will gladly testify against both of you to save myself." Cynthia lets out a wail of absolute despair. She drops to her knees, grabbing Richard's pant legs, sobbing that she has no money, no credit, and nowhere to go. Richard violently kicks his leg free, sending her sprawling onto the floor. He turns his back on his ruined family and walks voluntarily out of the ballroom, his eyes vacant, his entire life erased. The federal agents haul Spencer and Jasmine toward the exit. Jasmine is sobbing uncontrollably, her makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. The heavy mahogany doors close behind them with a solid, echoing thud. They are gone. Cynthia is left sitting alone in the middle of the dance floor. The woman who spent her entire life judging others, manipulating her family, and treating me like a disease is now a destitute pariah sitting in a puddle of spilled champagne. She frantically looks for a scapegoat. She turns her wild, furious eyes toward me. She attempts to stand, but her knees give out, so she just points a trembling finger in my direction. "You orchestrated this entire nightmare," Cynthia screams, her voice hoarse. "You bought that mortgage just to destroy us. You are a monster. You have no loyalty. You are not my daughter." Julian steps smoothly in front of me, his broad shoulders instantly shielding me from her erratic wrath. But I place a gentle hand on his arm and step out to face her myself. I look her dead in the eye, my voice slicing through her hysterical screams with absolute sub-zero calm. "You are absolutely right, Cynthia," I reply, my tone devoid of a single ounce of pity. "I am not your daughter. I am Victoria Sterling's daughter. You built a fragile house of cards on a foundation of lies, greed, and abuse. I simply refuse to be the joker holding it up anymore. You did this to yourself. Private security guards gently but firmly lift Cynthia off the floor. She does not fight them. She is completely broken, her spirit crushed under the heavy weight of her own monumental arrogance. They march her out of the room, her designer heels dragging sadly on the marble floor. The silence lingers for a brief moment before Victoria steps up to the microphone on the stage. She does not acknowledge the chaotic criminal exit. She simply smiles, radiating the warm, commanding energy of a true matriarch. She tells the guests that the evening's unscheduled entertainment has concluded and invites everyone to return to the dance floor to celebrate the union of two people who built their empires on hard work and genuine integrity. The band immediately launches into an upbeat, soulful jazz number. The heavy tension shatters, instantly replaced by the joyful clinking of glasses and the vibrant hum of a party that has just been reinvigorated. Julian takes my hand, raising it to his lips and kissing my knuckles. He looks at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated pride. We walk to the center of the dance floor, moving perfectly in sync. For the first time in my entire life, I feel completely weightless. The burden of my biological family's expectations, their constant belittling, their relentless attempts to make me feel small is permanently gone. Later that evening, as the magnificent reception begins to wind down, Julian and I step out onto the expansive stone balcony overlooking the illuminated botanical gardens. The cool night air feels incredibly refreshing. Julian wraps his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You were magnificent," Julian whispers. "You excised the poison, you own everything. Own." I lean back against him, feeling a profound sense of closure. But as we stand there enjoying the hard-won peace, Victoria steps onto the balcony. Her usual composed, elegant expression has shifted into a tight, calculating frown. She holds a sleek, silver flash drive in her hand. Victoria looks at me, her gaze piercing and dead serious. "I intercepted a package addressed to you at the main gate," she says, holding up the drive. "It is from the loan officer Jasmine slept with. He left a note saying this drive contains the original audio recordings from the day your biological parents signed the adoption papers. They didn't give you away because they were poor Nia. They sold you to cover up a murder." Jasmine stares at me, the blood completely draining from her perfectly contoured face. Her jaw works silently, trying to form words that simply refuse to materialize. The realization hits her with the blunt force of a physical blow. I did not just discover their fraud today. I have known for months. I watched them spend my stolen money, I tracked their IP addresses, and I handed the entire neatly wrapped package directly to the federal authorities. Spencer, realizing that his wife has absolutely no leverage and no money to save him, instantly turns on her like a cornered rat. He twists his head, glaring at Jasmine with a vicious, panicked snarl. He screams to the federal agents that Jasmine was the mastermind. He claims she forced him to steal my identity because her parents had cut off her credit cards. He loudly confesses that Jasmine forged my signature on the wire transfers while sitting at their kitchen island. He is desperately throwing the woman he swore to love and cherish directly under the proverbial bus in a pathetic attempt to secure a plea deal. Jasmine physically recoils, clutching her chest as if she has been shot. She looks at the man she married for status and wealth, realizing he is nothing but a cowardly grifter who is perfectly willing to let her take the fall. The lead federal agent does not even blink. He pulls a secondary warrant from his interior jacket pocket and unfolds it with slow, deliberate precision. He looks directly at Jasmine, his voice projecting clearly across the silent ballroom. He informs Jasmine that she is also under arrest for conspiracy to commit federal wire fraud accessory to identity theft and money laundering. He states that they have video evidence from bank security cameras showing her cashing the fraudulent checks. Two female agents step forward from the perimeter of the room. They grab Jasmine by the arms. For a split second, Jasmine goes entirely rigid. Then the reality of her shattered life finally breaks her. She begins to thrash wildly, kicking her designer heels and shrieking at the top of her lungs. She screams for her father, she screams for her mother, she screams that she is a victim of a massive misunderstanding. But nobody comes to her rescue. The elite guests of Atlanta, the high society socialites she spent her entire life desperately trying to impress, simply turn their backs. They sip their champagne and murmur to one another, treating her public arrest like a distasteful theatrical performance. They are ruthlessly cutting her out of their social circles in real time. The agents secure her wrists in steel cuffs. Jasmine and Spencer are marched out of the Glasshouse Botanical Garden, their protests echoing against the vaulted ceilings until the heavy mahogany doors slam shut behind them. I stand in the center of the dance floor, breathing in the crisp, clean air. The heavy toxic burden of the Addams family has been permanently removed from my life. Julian steps up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and pressing a warm, reassuring kiss to my temple. He tells me it is finally over. But as we turn to rejoin our wedding guests, Victoria approaches us. Her usual radiant, commanding smile is gone, replaced by a tight, calculating expression. She motions for Julian and me to follow her away from the crowded ballroom. We move quickly through the service corridor and step into a small, soundproof private bridal suite. Victoria locks the door behind us. She reaches into her evening clutch and pulls out a sleek silver flash drive. She looks at me, her eyes dark and incredibly serious. She explains that Cynthia was detained by our private security team outside the main gates just 20 minutes ago. Cynthia was completely hysterical, screaming that she had leverage, claiming she possessed a flash drive that would destroy the Sterling family empire and turn me against Victoria forever. Julian stiffens, stepping protectively to my side. He asks his mother what Cynthia thought she was going to accomplish. Victoria plugs the flash drive into a laptop sitting on the vanity table. She looks at me, her voice softening into a tone of deep, genuine sorrow. She tells me that the Addams family did not just adopt me out of the goodness of their hearts. She tells me that my adoption was a carefully orchestrated cover-up for a crime they committed over 2 decades ago. I stare at the screen as a grainy, digitized video file begins to play. It is dated 22 years ago. The footage is from a security camera inside a chemical engineering laboratory. I watch as a younger Richard Addams and a younger Cynthia sneak into the facility late at night. I watch them systematically sabotage a critical pressure valve on a massive testing unit. Victoria pauses the video. She takes a deep breath, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder. She tells me that the laboratory belonged to my biological parents. They were brilliant chemical engineers who had just patented a revolutionary synthetic compound, a patent that Richard Addams desperately wanted to acquire for his own failing manufacturing company. When my biological parents refused to sell Richard, and Cynthia broke into the lab and tampered with the equipment, hoping to cause a minor accident that would bankrupt the facility and force a sale. But the sabotage resulted in a catastrophic explosion. My biological parents were killed instantly. The room spins. The air leaves my lungs in a sharp, agonizing rush. I grip the edge of the vanity table, my knuckles turning white as I process the horrifying truth. The people who raised me, the people who locked me in a basement and treated me like garbage for 18 years, were the exact same people who murdered my real parents. Victoria explains that Richard used his political connections to cover up the sabotage, ruling it a tragic workplace accident. He then swept in, acquired the company for pennies on the dollar, and took control of the groundbreaking patent. That stolen patent became the entire foundation of the Addams family wealth. And to ensure there were no loose ends, to guarantee that nobody would ever look too closely at the orphaned child left behind, Richard and Cynthia adopted me. They kept me close, oppressed and silenced. I was not just a scapegoat. I was a stolen heir, living as a prisoner inside a mansion built with my own parents' blood money. Julian pulls me into his chest, holding me so tightly I can feel his heart pounding against mine. He promises me that Richard and Cynthia will spend the rest of their miserable lives rotting in a federal penitentiary. I look up at Victoria. I ask her how she knows all of this. I ask her why Cynthia thought this video would make me hate the Sterling family. Victoria meets my gaze, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She tells me that my biological mother was not just a brilliant engineer. She was Victoria's younger sister. The revelation drops like a bombshell. Victoria Sterling is not just my mentor or my adoptive mother figure. She is my biological aunt. She spent the last 2 decades meticulously building the Sterling capital empire, gathering resources, power, and influence, all while secretly tracking the Addams family. She orchestrated the hostile takeover of their company. She allowed Spencer to dig his own fraudulent grave. She brought Julian and me together, knowing we would be an unstoppable force. Every single move Victoria made over the last 20 years was a calculated, brilliant act of vengeance to destroy the people who murdered her sister and stole her niece. I look at the silver flash drive, then at Victoria. The anger I felt toward the Addams family transforms into a cold, unbreakable resolve. I am not just a survivor anymore. I am the rightful owner of their entire legacy, and I am going to take back absolutely everything they stole. Richard's knees physically buckle. He catches himself against the edge of a high-top cocktail table, his knuckles turning stark white as he grasps the glass surface for dear life. The arrogant swagger of the country club patriarch completely evaporates, leaving behind nothing but a terrified, aging man. He shakes his head frantically, his jowls quivering as he looks from me to the federal agents. He tries to speak, but his throat is completely dry. He manages a pathetic croak, claiming the recordings are fake, that Spencer must have manipulated the audio using artificial intelligence, that he would never engage in such blatant criminality. But the lead agent simply nods at me, a silent acknowledgement of the ironclad evidence my team has already handed over to their cybercrimes division. The agent steps forward, pulling a second set of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. He informs Richard Addams that he is under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aiding and abetting money laundering, and corporate embezzlement. The sound of the metal ratcheting tight around Richard's wrists echoes sharply through the glass house. It is the sound of an entire dynasty crumbling into dust. Cynthia watches her husband being restrained, her perfectly contoured face twisting in absolute horror. For 30 years, she built her entire identity on being the untouchable matriarch of a wealthy, powerful family. Now she is watching her husband and son-in-law being treated like common criminals in front of the very society she desperately wanted to impress. In a spectacular display of self-preservation, she immediately steps away from Richard. She presses her hands to her chest, tears welling in her eyes, and launches into a hysterical performance. Cynthia tells the agents she had no idea what her husband was doing. She claims she was just a devoted housewife, completely ignorant of the family's financial dealings. She begs them to spare her, pointing a trembling finger at Richard, insisting that he kept her entirely in the dark, and that she is a victim of his financial abuse. I do not even raise my voice, but my words cut through her pathetic sobbing with lethal precision. I remind Cynthia that ignorance is not a valid legal defense when she is the primary managing director of the offshore shell company used to funnel Spencer's stolen funds. I tell her that my forensic accounting team found her signature on every single falsified tax return for the past 5 years. I point out that she personally authorized the wire transfers to pay for her luxury vacations, her designer jewelry, and her extravagant country club memberships using money stolen directly from my identity. Cynthia freezes. The fake tears instantly dry up. She looks at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated venom. She realizes she cannot charm or cry her way out of this. A female federal agent steps out from the crowd and approaches Cynthia. She recites the exact same charges as she pulls Cynthia's arms behind her back. Cynthia fights back, twisting her body and shrieking about her designer gown, demanding they take their hands off her, screaming that she is a respectable woman. The agent ignores her hysterics and locks the cuffs securely in place. Jasmine, who is already in custody and being held by another agent, watches her parents fall. Her entire safety net is gone. The wealth she relied on, the parents who shielded her from every consequence, the husband she married for status, they are all going to federal prison. She looks at me, her mascara running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. She begs me for mercy. She calls me her sister, pleading with me to tell the agents to let them go, promising that they will pay me back every single cent. I look at Jasmine with absolute zero empathy. I tell her we were never sisters. I tell her she was a parasite, and I was the host, and the host has finally decided to cut the parasite off. I remind her that she spent her entire life stepping on my neck to elevate herself, and now she can enjoy the view from the bottom. The federal agents begin to march, the 4 of them, toward the exit. The guests part like the Red Sea, creating a wide path of shame. Nobody offers a word of support. Nobody steps forward to defend them. The state senators, the tech executives, the elite investors all stand silently, their faces masks of disgust and morbid fascination. Several people have their phones out recording the ultimate downfall of the Addams family. But before they reach the heavy mahogany doors, Victoria Sterling steps smoothly into their path. She looks at Richard and Cynthia, her presence commanding the absolute attention of everyone in the room. She does not look angry. She looks victorious. Victoria addresses Richard directly. She tells him that the financial fraud is just the beginning of his problems. She reveals that the SEC investigation into his current company prompted a deep dive into the origins of his wealth. She tells him that my team uncovered the original laboratory reports from the chemical fire 22 years ago, the fire that killed my biological parents. Richard goes completely rigid. All the color drains from his face. The financial ruin was terrifying, but this new revelation is a death sentence. Victoria explains to the entire silent ballroom that Richard and Cynthia sabotaged the lab equipment to force a sale, murdering my parents to steal the groundbreaking synthetic compound patent that built the Addams empire. She tells them that the arson investigators have reopened the case based on new digital evidence we provided. She informs them that they will not just be facing wire fraud charges, they will be facing double homicide. Cynthia lets out a blood-curdling scream. Her legs give out entirely. The female agent has to physically hold her up by her armpits. Richard simply stares straight ahead, his eyes vacant and dead. He knows it is over. There is no loophole, no expensive lawyer, and no bribe that can save him from a murder charge. Victoria steps aside, gesturing toward the doors with an elegant sweep of her hand. The agents drag the screaming, sobbing, broken remnants of my former family out into the humid Atlanta night. The heavy wooden doors close behind them with a loud, definitive thud. They are permanently erased from my world. The silence in the glass house lingers for a few seconds. Then Julian steps up beside me. He wraps his arms securely around my waist, grounding me. He looks down at me, his dark eyes filled with overwhelming pride and deep, unconditional love. He kisses my temple, whispering that the poison has finally been extracted. Victoria walks over to us, a soft, genuine smile softening her sharp features. She pulls me into a warm embrace. She tells me that the empire is finally secure, that justice has been served, and that my biological parents can finally rest in peace. The band, taking their cue from Victoria, begins to play an upbeat, joyful jazz number. The oppressive tension shatters completely. The guests break into loud, celebratory applause, raising their champagne flutes in our direction. The air feels crisp, clean, and electric. I turn to Julian, a real radiant smile spreading across my face. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. The girl who was locked in a basement is gone. I am a titan, surrounded by people who value my strength, standing at the helm of a massive empire alongside a husband who adores me. We walk to the center of the dance floor, moving perfectly in sync, ready to begin our new life together. Jasmine stares at this piece of paper like it is a venomous snake. Her perfectly manicured fingers tremble violently as she registers the sheer indignity of the offer. The golden child, the woman who spent her entire life mocking my clothes, my ambitions, and my very existence, is now staring at a printed application for a mop and a bucket. "You cannot be serious," Jasmine whispers, her voice cracking into a pathetic wheeze. "I am an Addams. I have a master's degree in art history. I cannot clean parking garages." "You are the wife of a convicted federal felon and the daughter of 2 murderers," I reply, my voice carrying absolute zero warmth. "The Addams name is officially synonymous with absolute disgrace. You have 0 assets, 0 credit, and absolutely no marketable skills. Take the job, Jasmine, or figure out how to pay for your life using your art history degree." I turn my back on her. It is the ultimate insult. I do not even stay to watch her cry. I give a subtle nod to my head of security. 2 guards step forward, lifting Jasmine by her arms and escorting her toward the service elevator. She does not fight. She clutches the crumpled job application against her chest, her head hanging low in utter, devastating defeat. The ballroom is perfectly silent. The elite guests, the politicians, the CEOs, and the socialites have just witnessed a complete, ruthless dismantling of an entire dynasty. They stand frozen, processing the absolute masterclass in retribution. They are waiting for my next move. They are waiting to see how the new apex predator operates. Julian steps up beside me, his hand resting securely on the small of my back. His presence is a solid grounding force. We turn to face the crowd together. Victoria Sterling glides onto the main stage, commanding the room effortlessly. She taps the microphone once. The sharp sound snaps everyone back to reality. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria begins, her voice echoing with elegant, lethal authority. We apologize for the unscheduled pest control. However, I believe a wedding is the perfect occasion to clean house and start fresh. A ripple of nervous, appreciative laughter moves through the crowd. The Atlanta elite are highly adaptable creatures. They are eager to align themselves with the winning side. Victoria smiles, looking directly at me with fierce pride. For 22 years, a great injustice was perpetrated against my family. The people who just left this room in handcuffs stole my sister's life, her brilliant work, and her only child. But today that child took back her rightful place. Victoria raises her crystal champagne glass high into the air. I ask you all to raise your glasses, not just to the newlyweds, but to the true heir of the Sterling legacy, the rightful owner of the patents that built this city, and the new CEO of our combined empires. To my niece, Nia Sterling. The entire ballroom erupts. The applause is deafening, washing over me in a thunderous wave of validation. Glasses clink, cheers bounce off the glass ceiling, and the string quartet immediately transitions into a triumphant, sweeping melody. The high society that once looked down on me as the awkward, unwanted adopted girl is now giving me a frantic, standing ovation. Julian pulls me into a deep, passionate kiss right in the middle of the dance floor. The flashbulbs of the society photographers capture the exact moment my victory is immortalized. Mrs. Sterling, Julian murmurs against my lips, using my reclaimed name with a wicked, loving smile. You look absolutely terrifying and utterly gorgeous. I am just getting started, I reply, feeling a surge of pure, unadulterated power coursing through my veins. The rest of the reception becomes a masterclass in networking and absolute dominance. The power shift is instantaneous. The state senator who previously ignored my existence now practically trips over himself to offer his congratulations and pledge his political support to our new ventures. The corporate executives who used to play golf with Richard Adams now hand me their platinum business cards, desperate to secure funding from my capital firm. I handle every single interaction with flawless grace. I politely accept their sudden, transparent loyalty, while mentally noting exactly who had supported Richard and who had stayed neutral. I am no longer the victim. I am the architect of my own destiny, and I hold the absolute blueprints to their financial futures. As midnight approaches, Julian and I finally slip away from the crowded dance floor. We walk out onto the grand stone terrace, overlooking the sprawling, illuminated botanical gardens. The night air is crisp and cool. The adrenaline that has fueled me for the past 4 hours finally begins to settle, replaced by a profound, unshakable peace. I look out at the city skyline in the distance. The lights of the Sterling Capitol Tower shine brightly against the dark sky, a towering beacon of the empire I now completely control. Victoria joins us on the terrace, holding 3 crystal flutes of vintage champagne. She hands one to me and one to Julian. The federal authorities just called my legal team, Victoria states, her voice filled with quiet, lethal satisfaction. Richard and Cynthia have been formally charged with double homicide and corporate espionage. They were denied bail. They will remain in federal maximum security custody until the trial. Spencer is already cooperating, giving the SEC every single offshore account number to save himself. And Jasmine? I ask, staring at the golden bubbles rising in my glass. She reported to the downtown parking facility. Julian answers, checking a secure message on his phone. She signed the employment paperwork 15 minutes ago. She is currently pushing a mop on the 3rd floor. I take a slow sip of my champagne. The circle is finally complete. The people who tried to bury me are now buried under the crushing weight of their own crimes. The woman who stole my childhood is locked in a concrete cell, and the sister who treated me like dirt is quite literally cleaning up my dirt. You did your parents proud today, Nia, Victoria says softly, placing a warm hand on my cheek. They were brilliant, kind people. They would be in absolute awe of the woman you have become. I had an excellent teacher, I reply, smiling at the biological aunt who saved me, who trained me, and who handed me the very sword I used to slay my monsters. Julian wraps his arm securely around my shoulders, pulling me flush against his side. So, what is the first official order of business for the new CEO on Monday morning? I look back at the glowing city skyline, my mind already calculating the next massive moves. The Adams Manufacturing Company will be completely dismantled. I will liquidate their assets, rebrand the stolen patents under my biological parents' true names, and use the massive profits to fund a global scholarship for orphan children pursuing chemical engineering. I will erase the Adams name from the corporate map entirely. We build, I say, my voice steady and resolute. We tear down the rotten foundations they left behind, and we build something that will last 1,000 years. Julian grins, raising his glass to clink against mine. To the Empire. To the Empire, Victoria echoes. I take one last look at the stars above us, feeling the presence of the parents I never got to know finally at rest. I turn back to my husband and my family, entirely ready to conquer whatever comes next. Cynthia stares at the thick parchment paper resting on her lap. Her perfectly manicured hands shake so violently that the heavy gold seal catches the chandelier light, flashing like a warning beacon. She looks down at the bold, unforgiving ink of my signature. It is not just a piece of paper. It is the absolute, undeniable end of the Addams family dynasty. She gasps for air, her chest heaving against the tight confines of her designer dress. She looks up, her eyes wild, darting frantically toward the VIP tables. She is searching for a lifeline. She locks eyes with Beatrice Harrington, the president of the country club board, a woman Cynthia has played tennis with every Tuesday for the past 15 years. Beatrice, Cynthia chokes out her voice, a ragged, desperate plea. Beatrice, please, tell them this is insane. Tell them who I am. Beatrice does not blink. She calmly sets her crystal champagne flute down on the white linen tablecloth. Without a single word, she turns her back. Her husband follows suit. Within seconds, the entire table of Atlanta's most elite socialites physically turns away from Cynthia. The message is unanimous and brutally clear. Cynthia is no longer one of them. She is a liability, a contagious disease of poverty and scandal that they refuse to catch. Cynthia lets out a sound that is half sob, half scream. She turns her frantic gaze toward Richard. My biological father is currently being hauled toward the ballroom exit by 3 federal agents. His hands are cuffed securely behind his back. His expensive tuxedo jacket is rumpled, his tie askew. Richard! Cynthia wails, stumbling forward and dropping the foreclosure document onto the marble floor. Richard, do not leave me. Tell them to stop. Do something. Richard pauses just before the heavy oak doors. He looks back over his shoulder. For a split second, I wonder if a shred of husbandly loyalty still exists within him. But Richard just looks at the woman he built his fraudulent empire with, his eyes entirely vacant. He does not offer a word of comfort. He does not promise to fix it. He simply turns his head back around, marching out into the night to face his federal indictment. He has completely abandoned her to save whatever miserable fraction of his own skin he can. The betrayal shatters whatever fragile composure Cynthia has left. She collapses back into the chair, weeping uncontrollably. It is an ugly, visceral display of pure defeat. I do not feel a single ounce of pity. I simply raise my hand, giving a sharp, precise nod to the head of my private security detail. 4 heavily muscled guards in black suits immediately surround Cynthia. They do not ask her to leave. They lift her by the arms, hauling her up from the chair. She does not even fight them. She is dead weight, a hollow shell of the terrifying tyrant who used to lock me in a freezing basement for making too much noise. As the guards escort her out of the ballroom, her expensive heels drag against the polished floor, leaving scuff marks that my janitorial staff will easily wipe away tomorrow. The heavy ballroom doors swing shut. The click of the latch echoes like a gunshot. The room is completely silent. 300 of the most powerful people in the state are holding their collective breath, processing the absolute masterclass in corporate and personal retribution they have just witnessed. They are waiting for my next move. Victoria Sterling glides onto the stage, the heavy silk of her emerald gown brushing against the floor. She moves with the effortless, lethal grace of an apex predator who has just successfully defended her territory. She steps up to the microphone, tapping the metal grate once. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announces, her voice smooth, rich, and utterly commanding. "I do apologize for the unscheduled pest control. However, I have always believed that a wedding is the perfect occasion to clean house." A ripple of relieved, appreciative laughter washes through the crowd. The tension breaks instantly. The elite are nothing if not adaptable. They recognize a power shift and they are eager to align themselves with the winning side. Victoria raises her glass. "Tonight, we are not just celebrating a marriage. We are celebrating the ascension of a true visionary. We are celebrating a woman who took the broken pieces of her past and forged them into an unbreakable empire. Please raise your glasses to my partner, my family, and the undisputed future of Sterling Capital, to Nia and Julian." The applause that follows is deafening. It bounces off the glass ceiling, a thunderous, vibrating wave of absolute validation. Men in bespoke suits and women in couture gowns rise to their feet, giving me a standing ovation. They are applauding my ruthlessness. They are bowing to my power. Julian steps up beside me, wrapping his arm firmly around my waist. He pulls me flush against his chest, his dark eyes shining with intense, fiery pride. He leans down, his breath warm against my ear. "You were magnificent," Julian whispers, his voice thick with emotion. "You excise the poison. You own it all." "We own it all." I correct him, turning my face to capture his lips in a deep, passionate kiss. The flashbulbs of the society photographers explode around us, immortalizing the exact moment I claimed my kingdom. The string quartet seamlessly transitions into a lively, triumphant symphony. The reception resumes with twice the energy it had before. The champagne flows, the crystal clinks, and the socialites who previously ignored me now practically trip over themselves to offer their congratulations. I handle every interaction with flawless, calculated grace. I shake hands with state senators who promise legislative support for my new commercial developments. I accept business cards from banking executives who suddenly want to fast-track my corporate credit lines. I am no longer the awkward adopted girl from the basement. I am the architect of my own destiny, and I hold the blueprints to their financial futures. Exactly 48 hours later, the crisp Monday morning sun rises over the affluent suburbs of Atlanta. Julian and I pull up to the wrought iron gates of the Adams family estate in my sleek black town car. My lead security officer is already standing by the front door, flanked by a local sheriff's deputy. I step out of the car, the cool morning breeze catching the edge of my tailored blazer. I walk up the sweeping driveway, my heels clicking sharply against the cobblestones. I reach the front porch and look at the heavy oak door. The house that was once my prison now belongs entirely to me. The sheriff's deputy breaks the seal on the lock. I push the door open. The mansion is completely silent. The grand foyer, usually bustling with Cynthia's hired help and decorators, is empty. I walk through the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. They followed my orders to the letter. The keys are sitting precisely on the center of the marble kitchen island. They did not take a single piece of furniture. They did not take a single light bulb. They packed their clothes and fled like thieves in the night. I walk down the hallway and stand in front of the door that leads to the basement. I turn the brass knob, looking down the dark, narrow staircase where I spent 18 years of my life shivering in the dark. I do not feel fear anymore. I do not feel small. "What do you want to do with the property?" Julian asks, coming up behind me and resting his hands on my shoulders. "We can flip it, sell it to a developer, or put it in the corporate rental portfolio." I look at the basement stairs one last time, then close the door, firmly locking it forever. "Tear it down," I state, my voice ringing clear and absolute in the empty house. "Bring in the demolition crew tomorrow morning. Raze this entire mansion to the ground. Clear the lot, pour a new foundation, and build a state-of-the-art youth shelter for kids transitioning out of the foster care system. We are going to take the darkest place in my life and turn it into a beacon of absolute light. Julian smiles, kissing the crown of my head. Consider it done, Madam CEO. We walk out of the front door together, stepping out of the shadows and directly into the brilliant, blinding light of our new empire. The room erupts in applause. The jazz band strikes up a smooth, upbeat tempo. The dark cloud has lifted. I look at Julian, and for the first time in my life, I am standing in a room entirely filled with people who genuinely want me there. Julian pulls me against his chest, his arms wrapping tightly around my waist. He kisses me with a fierce, possessive pride that sends a warm thrill straight down to my toes. When we pull apart, the high society crowd descends upon us, but the energy has completely shifted. There are no condescending glances. There are no whispered insults behind manicured hands. The wolves of Atlanta have recognized the new alpha, and they are falling in line with breathtaking speed. A prominent state senator who had spent the last decade accepting lavish campaign donations from Richard practically shoves a waiter aside to shake my hand. He offers his unwavering support for any future Sterling Capital developments. I smile politely, taking his card, already calculating exactly how to leverage his sudden loyalty to fast-track the permits for my new youth shelter project. The elite investors who had treated me like an invisible ghost just 2 hours ago are now pitching me their tech portfolios, desperate for a fraction of my attention. I navigate the shark-infested waters with flawless grace. I am sharp, articulate, and completely in control. Every interaction is a strategic victory. Julian stands firmly by my side, not as a shield, but as an equal partner. Whenever a conversation veers too close to the traumatic events of the evening, he smoothly redirects the narrative back to business, protecting my energy while amplifying my authority. Victoria watches us from the edge of the dance floor, a look of profound satisfaction softening her sharp features. The empire she bled to protect is finally secure. The legacy of my biological parents has been entirely reclaimed from the hands of murderers. The reception continues late into the night, transforming from a high-stakes networking event into a genuine, vibrant celebration. We dance until my feet ache, surrounded by friends who celebrate my resilience rather than exploiting my pain. For the very first time, I am not bracing myself for the next insult or anticipating the next cruel prank. I am simply a bride, a CEO, and a woman who has finally stepped entirely into the light. The aftermath is swift, brutal, and flawlessly executed. By Monday morning, the financial world wakes up to a massive earthquake. The Wall Street Journal and every major news network run the exact same headline across their front pages. The Addams family is completely dismantled. The SEC freezes every single corporate account associated with Richard's fraudulent shell companies. The federal authorities deny bail for both Richard and Cynthia, citing their vast offshore resources and declaring them severe flight risks. They are remanded to a maximum security detention center, trading their silk sheets and country club memberships for concrete walls and orange jumpsuits. Their trial will be a mere formality. My forensic accounting team delivered a mountain of irrefutable evidence. The reopened arson investigation, fueled by the original laboratory reports we uncovered, seals their fate permanently. They will spend the rest of their natural lives behind bars, locked away in the exact kind of dark, cold isolation they once forced upon me. Jasmine's downfall is less spectacular, but infinitely more humiliating. True to my word, the Sterling Capital Human Resources Department processes her employment paperwork for the downtown parking facility. Stripped of her credit cards, her designer wardrobe, and her prestigious last name, she has absolutely no choice but to show up. My security chief sends me a single silent video feed on Tuesday afternoon. It shows Jasmine wearing a gray, oversized maintenance uniform, pushing a heavy yellow mop bucket across the concrete floor of Level 3. A group of her former socialite friends drive past in a silver Porsche. They do not stop. They do not wave. They look right through her, as if she is entirely invisible. The golden child has become a ghost, erased by the very society she worshipped. She drops her mop and buries her face in her hands, weeping in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the parking garage. I close the video feed and delete it permanently. The Adams family no longer occupies a single frame of my mental real estate. They are ghosts, and I have an empire to build. I walk into the executive boardroom of Sterling Capital. The space is vast, lined with mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling city below. The entire board of directors stands in absolute respectful silence as I take my seat at the head of the long glass table. Julian sits to my right, his legal expertise ready to deploy. Victoria sits to my left, the veteran general proudly watching her protégé take command. I do not hesitate. I initiate the immediate liquidation of the Adams manufacturing assets. We absorb their viable technologies, rebrand the stolen synthetic compound patents under the true names of my biological parents, and immediately redirect the massive influx of capital into our new philanthropic division. We break ground on the Nia Sterling Youth Center before the month is over. It is built directly over the raised salted earth where the Adams Mansion used to stand. The dark, freezing basement where I spent my childhood is completely excavated, filled with solid concrete, and transformed into a bright, sunlit art studio for teenagers transitioning out of the foster care system. We build counseling centers, job training facilities, and safe housing. We take the site of my greatest trauma and forge it into a fortress of hope for thousands of children who need a protector. 6 months later, Julian and I stand on the rooftop terrace of our new penthouse in the city center. The evening air is warm and sweet. I lean back against his chest, his arms wrapping securely around me as we look out over the glittering skyline. The lights of the Sterling Tower burn brightly, a permanent testament to survival strategy and unbreakable willpower. "You did it," Julian murmurs, pressing a soft kiss to my temple. "You rewrote the entire story." I smile, feeling a deep, resonating peace settle firmly into my bones. The terrified girl in the basement is gone forever. The scapegoat is dead. I am a titan, an architect of my own absolute destiny, standing at the pinnacle of a world I conquered on my own terms. I turn in Julian's arms, looking up into the eyes of the man who loved me when I had nothing, and who stands beside me now that I have everything. "No," I reply, my voice steady and filled with absolute certainty. "We are just starting the next chapter." Camera action fade to black. The screen remains completely dark for 5 long seconds. The silence is profound, absolute, and perfectly resolved. Then the sharp, unmistakable sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut shatters the quiet. Camera action fade in, a stark fluorescent-lit federal penitentiary visiting room. Richard Adams sits in a bolted-down metal chair, his hunched posture a stark contrast to the arrogant patriarch who once ruled Atlanta high society. He is wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that hangs loosely off his thinning frame. His hair is entirely white, unkempt, and his face is deeply lined with the exhaustion of a man who knows he will never breathe free air again. Across from him sits a junior public defender, a young man who looks entirely bored, checking his cheap wristwatch. Richard leans forward, his hands trembling as he rests them on the scuffed table. He begs the lawyer to file another appeal, insisting there must be a loophole. A technicality, some obscure precedent that can overturn his double homicide conviction. He promises money that he no longer has, claiming he has hidden assets the feds never found. The lawyer simply sighs, closes his legal pad, and stands up. He informs Richard that the appellate court rejected his final petition yesterday. The conviction is ironclad. The forensic evidence provided by Sterling Capital was flawless. The lawyer turns and walks away, leaving Richard utterly alone in the harsh, unforgiving light. The guard taps Richard's shoulder, instructing him it is time to go back to his cell. The former titan of industry shuffles away, reduced to nothing more than an inmate number. Camera action quick cut to a dingy, cramped laundromat on the outskirts of the city. Cynthia stands in front of a battered washing machine, her hands aggressively scrubbing a stain out of a cheap synthetic blouse. The designer gowns, the diamond tennis bracelets, and the perfectly contoured facade are gone. Her hair is dull and graying at the roots. She lives in a 200-square-foot efficiency apartment above a noisy auto body shop, surviving entirely on a meager state pension after her assets were seized to pay restitution to the Sterling estate. A woman next to her accidentally bumps her laundry basket. 10 years ago, Cynthia would have unleashed a torrent of vitriol demanding the woman be removed from her presence. Today, she just shrinks back, muttering a quiet apology, keeping her eyes glued to the spinning drum of the washing machine. She is terrified of drawing attention to herself. The society pages still occasionally run "Where Are They Now?" pieces about the Addams family's spectacular downfall. Cynthia lives in perpetual fear of being recognized, of seeing the disgust and mockery in the eyes of strangers. She is a ghost haunting the edges of a world that has completely forgotten her. Camera action cut to the subterranean level of a downtown parking facility. The air is thick with the smell of exhaust and damp concrete. Jasmine wears a high-visibility yellow vest over a stained gray uniform. Her hands, once perfectly manicured and adorned with expensive rings, are rough and calloused. She is emptying a heavy trash receptacle near the payment kiosk. Her shoulders slump with the physical exhaustion of manual labor. She pauses to wipe sweat from her forehead, catching her reflection in the glass of the kiosk. The arrogant, entitled golden child is completely gone, replaced by a weary, defeated woman who is entirely invisible to the people she serves. A sleek, custom black Maybach glides down the ramp, its engine purring with quiet, lethal power. The car stops at the kiosk. The tinted rear window rolls down smoothly. Jasmine freezes. She knows that car. Nia sits in the back seat wearing an immaculate white tailored suit, scrolling through a tablet. She does not look up. She does not even acknowledge Jasmine's existence. Julian is sitting beside her, engaged in a low, intense phone call about international acquisitions. The driver hands Jasmine the parking ticket and a crisp $100 bill as a tip. Jasmine's hands shake as she takes the money. She wants to scream. She wants to beg for forgiveness. She wants to demand her old life back. But she looks at the cold, impenetrable tinted glass as the window rolls back up, and she knows it is completely useless. She is nothing to them. The Maybach pulls out into the bright city sunlight, leaving Jasmine standing in the dark, clutching the broom that is now her entire future. Camera action. A sweeping cinematic drone shot rising over the Atlanta skyline, pushing toward the massive gleaming tower of Sterling Capital. The empire is thriving. It is a juggernaut of industry, setting new standards for corporate integrity and aggressive expansion. But the true crown jewel of the Sterling legacy is located across town. Camera action cut to the Nia Sterling Youth Center. The sun is shining brightly over the sprawling, state-of-the-art campus. The campus is vibrant, filled with the sounds of teenagers laughing, playing basketball, and walking between the art studios and the tech labs. This is the exact site where the Addams mansion used to stand. The soil that once held my prison now nurtures the future. I am walking across the courtyard holding a stack of architectural blueprints for our upcoming national expansion. Julian walks beside me, his hand resting comfortably on the small of my back. He is smiling, watching a group of kids test a robotics project in the courtyard. A young girl no older than 15 runs up to us. She has paint smudged on her cheek and a brilliant, hopeful smile on her face. She holds up a canvas showing me her latest project. It is a beautiful, chaotic explosion of color, raw and powerful. I look at the painting, then look at the girl. I see the same fear and potential that I once had, but here she is safe. Here she is protected. I tell her the painting is magnificent, that she has a genuine gift, and that I want it displayed in the main lobby of the Sterling Capital headquarters. The girl's eyes widen in absolute awe, and she hugs me tightly before running off to tell her friends. I watch her go, feeling a profound, resonating warmth spread through my chest. The cycle of abuse is permanently broken. The trauma has been alchemized into absolute triumph. Julian wraps his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. You built an empire, Nia. But this, he gestures to the kids in the courtyard, this is your masterpiece. I lean back against him, feeling the solid, unbreakable foundation of the life we have built together. I am no longer the victim. I am the protector. I am the avalanche that cleared the mountain so something beautiful could finally grow. We built it. I correct him softly, turning my head to meet his eyes. And we are just getting started. Camera action. The camera slowly pans up from Nia and Julian rising above the youth center, above the trees catching the brilliant glare of the sun as it shines down on the city. The screen fills with pure, blinding light, fade to white.